I'm Annabelle Slate, and I'm involved with a farm on Lake Simcoe called Clearwater Farm, which is a regenerative farm where, driven by kids, we farm people. One of the things that I loved from today, and I think it's a great image and a great starting point, was when Dan Longboat put one hand up like this, the other hand up like that, and said what it's all about is this beautiful connection between culture and nature. And what a lovely image that was to stay in my mind and carry away.
Bill Bowie, we're here really to honor and to energize the Greater Tkaronto Bioregion, but I wanted to introduce the broader interwoven bioregions that are also here in the room, and to voice that as an invitation to you all in the Greater Tkaronto Bioregion to do two things. One is to do really great work that we in the other bioregions in this room and the other bioregions who aren't represented in here can learn from. So we've been here, a number of us have been here for a week, and we've already been learning from the great work that the Legacy Project has been doing. And the second component is a lot of us are doing innovative work that you may not have on your radar screen at all. And so ecosystems do work in this way, where they work in a hyper-localized way, but they're also tied into, as Joe mentioned up front, there's a planetary metabolism that we're all tied into.
My name is Joanna Kerr. I'm with a public foundation known as Make Way. On one side, we raise money from individuals and institutions, and our grant making goes to primarily Indigenous communities in rural and remote and northern communities. And it's determined by them. It's very trust-based. It's very participatory. It's multi-generational. And we also host about 130 donor-advised funds, but also community-advised funds. So communities that actually get a trust and they don't quite know how to spend it yet, they could park it within us and the community decides how it gets dispersed. In terms of this amazing initiative, I'm happy to be part of any further conversations to think about how to structure flow funds, collaborative funding, or a big bet proposal, because what you're all are doing here, I can say that we're doing here, is huge and audacious.
Andrew Telfer with Circular Innovation Council. Around funding and ecosystem is that we in Guelph Wellington on the food security side, we realized that we had a food security ecosystem, and all these organizations, 6, 8, 10, 12, were going out separately to Jane at Funder and Joe at Funder and Julie at Funder and Andrew at Funder. And then we thought, what are we doing? Like, why not get together and present ourselves as a big bet, as an ecosystem that those funders weren't just funding Andrew or Julia, or Andrew or Julia, they were funding Andrew and Julia, and also Joe and Jane and whatnot. And it was a very collaborative, we thought it was innovative.
How do we make it easier and more accessible for all of us to get the funding that we need? Perhaps we bring together all of the funders that are all funding environment and some of the projects that you're talking about, Joe, and have a one-stop shop so that we can do one funding application that covers a project versus having to put something in for 5 or 6, and just the amount of time it takes for organizations to do that. I think there would be a big benefit in having those funders work together, and we can work together on a bigger scale.
It's Bree. I'm so excited to share the liquid layer of love, being water. Water is life. Throughout all of what I'm hearing, there's a really amazing regenerative lens that we're hearing about. I feel really grateful to be connected with Heartwood Farms.
I'm Ali English. I work with the Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario. And yeah, I represent or work to support ecological farmers who I think are key land stewards and an important part of this work. And one of the challenges I've been thinking about lately are the barriers that new farmers face in starting out in agriculture.
I'm Debbe Crandall, Mount Wolfe Farm, and I think exploring community bonds, exploring how we, instead of scaling up, we scale out, we start to replicate through ecological farmers, through the land trust, to take what we've learned in all our different farms and to start to replicate it across. So it's not conservation or farming, it's the two of them together, because this kind of farming builds ecological, environmental, social stewardship and integrity.
I'm Sydney from Kinship Earth Flow Fund. Flow funding is really about relationships, identifying people who are doing incredible work, who have strong reputations in their communities of oftentimes doing a lot with a very little amount of resources. And so through our networks, we identify these individuals, we give them money, and we trust them to deploy it however they see fit, again, based on the needs of their communities.
There's a lot that's been shared today, and it's only scratching the surface of a story that's been going on for generations and millennia in different language. And so we're, as Joe said before, we are today, by being here, we are part of the story, and also we are invited to take authorship of the story and writing it all ourselves. And when we change from a story that is very familiar to a story that is not so familiar, there are a lot of question marks and a lot of places where it's like, wait, okay, this just like isn't landing with me yet. So I wanted to take a moment to just say that the Design School for Regenerating Earth, which Joe and Penny have co-founded, has an unbelievable wealth of information that covers like every single thing you could possibly have a question about. It's incredibly accessible. It's you can just look it up, the Design School for Regenerating Earth, and that's a way to also learn more about the other bioregional groups that are organizing across the planet, to understand how what Brian and Susan and the Legacy Project have done here with their incredibly passionate and dedicated work over these last years is part of a much bigger story, and how everything that they are doing and that everybody else here is doing is contributing to regeneration on this much larger scale, which is such a gift to life.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us today at the 7th Generation Greater Tkaronto Bioregional Regenerative Finance Forum. That's a tongue twister. I'd like to welcome you here to the Kortright Center for Conservation. I am the Senior Manager of Community Outreach and Education here at this location, and my name is Adrian O'Driscoll. I want to start off in a good way by respectfully acknowledging the lands that we are situated on today are the traditional territories and treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, and Haudenosaunee. And are home now to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. I also want to acknowledge many of the living and non-living things that we share the lands with that are integral to our own existence, because they're important to acknowledge as well. Toronto and Region Conservation Authority appreciates and respects the history and diversity of the land and is grateful to have the opportunity to work and meet in this territory. TRCA oversees over 40,000 acres of land and water for the purposes of conservation, and from our inception have realized the importance of and organize ourselves to take a watershed or bioregional approach to protecting these valuable natural resources. So it's fitting, I think, that the Conservation Authority staff are engaged in this forum today. Very grateful that you've chosen Kortright for your venue today and the important work that you are going to undertake. I just wanted to welcome you here and invite you to enjoy the rest of your day. So thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. We really appreciate that warm welcome. The Kortright is one of our favorite places, so appreciate you hosting us here today. It's also an important learning site for the bioregion, and want to acknowledge that as well. I'm Brian Puppa, Executive Director of the Legacy Project, the person you've been emailing and communicating with. I'll be directing traffic up here this morning, and the Legacy Project is a research and innovation group, and we're the core team for the GTB work. We've co-created this forum today with Joe Brewer and Penny Heipel, co-founders of the Design School for Regenerating Earth. I want to also say that a bioregion is based on geology, ecology, and culture. And it's about people in place, not people and place, people in place. It's about recognizing that we are part of life on Earth, that our environment shapes us just as we shape our environment, that we are nature. Our bioregion was originally outlined by David Crombie, former Toronto mayor, federal cabinet minister, co-founder of the Canadian Urban Institute. Crombie said about the bioregion in his 1992 regeneration report, "This approach is both a way of doing things and a way of thinking. It's not a new concept. Indigenous peoples have long understood their connectedness to the ecosystem, the land, water, air, and other life. Thinking about the whole bioregion helps focus attention on the interdependencies." This is back in 1992, more than 30 years ago. So he truly was groundbreaking. David Crombie, one of the brilliant synthesizers of our time, and we had the good fortune of spending time with him and did a short documentary with him. The GTB is located along the northwest shore of Lake Ontario, also touches Lake Erie and Lake Huron. There's the fuzzy boundaries up on the screen of the GTB. It extends beyond the Niagara Escarpment on the west into the Grand River Conservation Authority area, follows the Oak Ridges Moraine right across toward the east, all the rivers flowing north and south. The moraine, of course, a unique formation of sand and gravel left behind by the last glaciation 10 to 12,000 years ago. It slowly releases all the rain that falls on it, the source of, as I said, 65 waterways that lead into 16 major rivers. The GTB is 3 million hectares, 10 million people, about a quarter of the population of Canada. And Toronto has the world's largest greenbelt, over 800,000 hectares of protected land. Unique to Ontario, the conservation authorities are local watershed management agencies. There are 13 in the GTB, organized by watersheds. So that's the whirlwind tour of the GTB. So I'd like to introduce Susan Bosak, founder of the Legacy Project, a social science researcher and systems thinker and a best-selling author. And she leads the strategy work as part of the core team for the GTB. So please welcome Susan Bosak.
One of the questions I always ask is, how do you fix a broken tree? How do you fix a broken tree? The answer is that you don't, right? We always ask in our society today, here's the problem, here's the solution, how do we fix it? The issue is that the real problem isn't the problem and solution, but the way we think. Because in the real world, there are no simple problems and solutions. I took care of my mom for 12 years. She had dementia. And I really wanted to fix that, and I couldn't. And one of the lessons that I took away from that is that you have to live into that and navigate through and care, and sometimes that's all you can do. And I brought that lesson to the work that we're doing now. So I've come to think that maybe you don't fix a broken tree, but maybe if you look at this picture, you can see you can use the tree as a bridge to something new. The other part of my humility comes from how difficult it is to navigate through complexity. How many people have seen the movie Everything, Everywhere, All at Once? Okay. Now that movie's kind of weird. You start watching this and you're like, what the heck is going on, right? You're confused. But then if you just relax into it and flow into it, you start to think, hey, this is kind of cool. I have a feeling that's how you're going to feel today. You're going to start to feel like, wait, what are these people talking about? If you relax into it, I think you'll start to see it's kind of cool. It's one of those things, right? We do systems work, and that comes with a lot of humility. A lot of people say, okay, I'm doing systems work. I'm going to fix the healthcare system. I'm going to fix the economic system. That's not even big enough, right? You can't fix that because those systems are part of something even bigger. We need to do everything, everywhere, all at once. That's systems work, right? It sounds a little scary, which is why I said I feel very humbled a lot of the times. David Crombie, one of the things that he often says is, everything is connected to everything else. For our whole systems work, we're looking for synergies and patterns and processes. And every day when I go into meetings, I see how much I don't know. There are all these details out there, and I'm humbled by that. I also worry that I'm supposed to know it all, and I can't get myself lost in the details. We live in a world of experts where systems work really isn't valued. It certainly isn't funded. It was a long road to get here. So I have to constantly tell myself that it's okay that I don't know all those details, that all those details aren't my job, that somebody needs to do the whole systems work, the really big picture, long view. And I don't have to know every detail. So I'm humbled and I remind myself that that's okay. At the same time, I've got to be audacious. And I like this picture. This is, look up, up, up. Look at the bigness. We have a long history of humanity in harmony with all other life on Earth. The thing that's happened now is we are out of balance with life on Earth. And we have a choice, and this is something that Dan Longboat talks about, that all generations alive today have a choice, that we can either choose the charred path and we can continue to destroy life, or we can choose the green path and we can choose the continuation of life. We can choose to cultivate and steward and regenerate and connect bioregions around the planet, and that's pretty audacious. That's what we're going to ask you to do today. We talk about #change the story, and we're talking about the story that guides us every single day, what we value and what we don't. Stories are all we are. Human beings are story-making creatures. Our whole lives are about the stories that we create. Story by story, we will either create or destroy the world. That's the choice that we're at. And stories can be our most powerful wayfinding tool in a time of uncertainty. And when I say #change the story, this is a new old story. This is a story that draws on Indigenous roots going back thousands of years, but it's also bringing in the best of modern science. And this is mythic storytelling that I'm talking about here when I talk change the story. We're talking Star Wars, right? Are we going to use the Force for good, or are we going to be drawn over to the dark side? The ultimate goal is this grand narrative at the level of overstory, like this beautiful picture of this canopy of trees. We see this lovely canopy under which people can wander, ponder, rest. We can get tremendous strength from the land. So the storytelling in this moment has to be intensely human, and it has to be timelessly mythic, created across generations and with 7 generations in mind. Mythic. Once upon a time, as the world was in crisis, generations came together, grounded by the land, to change the story. So we're storytelling here this morning. That's what we're doing. And I want to give you the arc of the story, and it goes something like this. So there are 3 parts to the arc of the story that we'll be telling this morning. First, we're in a predicament, otherwise known as we're screwed. Then, what can we do? Then, supporting those doing it. That's the arc of the story. So let's take a look at the first one. We're in a predicament. Isn't that a great word, predicament? I like to say it, predicament. It's not problem solution, no outputs, no outcomes. This is 200 to 500 year work. You will not get immediate satisfaction from this work. What you'll get is deep meaning. Now, this is what a predicament looks like. It is a mess. No straight lines on a whiteboard, no white papers, no pilot programs. That time for all of that is long past. We need to get out in the literal and figurative mud and slog our way through. This is hard work. So what can we do? We need to do the work. And we need to follow the path. This is a wonderful photo that Joe took in Barichara, Colombia. And follow the path both in terms of Indigenous knowledge and the pathways that they talk about, the charred path or the green path. But also Joe has talked about the path in the design pathway for regenerating Earth, drawing on modern science. And he called his book The Pathway, because there's no other way forward. If you take a clear-eyed look at where we're at, there is no other way forward. So supporting those doing it is the final part of our story arc this morning. People working on the ground and generations who can come together to change the story. Indigenous people say that when you want to get something done, you bring together a fired-up youth with a feisty granny. Trust me, I've been in spaces, they get something done. And simply having those generations in the space changes the dynamic of the space, because you have people who are at the beginning and the end of their lifetime, and they bring a sense of perspective and meaning, and they can be truth tellers. So those generations are really important as the doers in our society. And we say that the future is in the hands of the young. What if we switched that and said that the future is in the hands of the elders, in the hands of the elders supporting the young? Then we all need to live into our role as elders in training. That's what all of us here in this room today can be. So we're in a predicament. What can we do? And supporting those doing it. That is the arc of the storytelling that we will be doing this morning. And we hope that the story that we tell here will start more storytelling in the community. Now, I want to do a really quick run through some basic concepts. There's going to be a lot thrown at you this morning, and I just want to help orient you to some of the stuff we're going to be talking about. First thing, finance. What we're going to be talking about is a lot more than money. It's about the flow of value. It's about the storage of value and not letting that value get too clogged up in one place, which is what's happening right now. And it's about the transformation of all of that value in service to life. We're drawing on the idea of ecological flows. A healthy ecosystem, there's constant flow. And we need to rethink finance to be in constant flow. Next word, bioregion. As Brian introduced, geology, ecology, culture, which draws on Indigenous history. It also asks, what's real? The city boundaries, we may have all sat down and agreed on them, but they're not real. They're a story that we tell ourselves, right? Do you know what's real in the GTB? The rivers. Those are real. And the flooding from those rivers is also real. You either move with the land or the land moves you. And so that's part of what understanding bioregion is. It means listening to the story of the soils, the landforms, the watersheds, the native plants and animals, and finally, the human cultures with their imagination and creativity. People in place and in our life place. That's another way to describe a bioregion. The place we live and the place that gives us life. Regeneration. I love this word. This is a powerful, amazing process of life restoring and renewing itself. Instead of destroying the earth, we can be stewards of the earth. And life, because life is self-organizing and regenerating, here's the cool thing. This is one of the major takeaways from the story this morning. Even small shifts that we make in life processes away from harm and towards sustaining life open up possibilities that multiply themselves. Think about that. That's really cool. That's really powerful. And we can tap into that. The last word I want to tell you is steward. As you experience your place, you begin to understand you matter in your place because you need to take care of your place. If you feel like a steward, that automatically implies relationship because you have to be taking care of something. And this story inherently counters feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, disconnection. A steward is a caretaker and a caregiver. And it's the essence of legacy, knowing that what you do ripples through time. The idea of being a steward, I think, is the greatest lesson that we can learn in life. It's not about you, right? That's really counter to the societal narrative right now. If you bundle all of this up, what does this big story look like? We talk about growing a tree of life. So you can see, this is a wonderful piece of artwork that was done by a local storyteller, Patricia Cambich. And you can see, we use this in all the meetings we do. We come in and instead of having a bunch of bullet pointed slides, we use art. And you can see hashtag change the story at the bottom left. You can see this is rooted in Indigenous worldviews and knowledge. The tree trunk centers the bioregion. Everything flows in, and you fractally scale up to the Great Lakes Basin, to planetary processes, so that bioregion is centralized. You have social regeneration on one side, ecological regeneration on the other side. They both need to be taking place at the same time. You have a number of themes running through the crown of the tree, and the ultimate goal, that bright star up in the right corner, our sun, ecopsychosocial well-being. What the heck does that mean? It means you can't be okay unless your community is okay, and our community can't be okay unless the natural world around us isn't okay, because then there's nothing to sustain us. So the bioregion, this is also important, is the smallest unit of health and well-being. You can't have health of individual. It's a contradiction in terms. The bioregion is the difference that makes a difference. It's where the well-being lives.
Our next speaker is one of our valued collaborators for the GTV work, and someone who I personally admire. Dr. Dan Longboat is Associate Professor in Indigenous Studies at Trent University and co-founder of the Indigenous Environmental Institute. He is invited to share across Turtle Island and lectures and teaches on diverse topics. He really wanted to be here in person, but we have the next best thing, thanks to technology. So I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Dan Longboat.
So greetings everyone. And I hope that you're all happy, healthy, and at peace. So Roroya Gewan Yangets, Kanyangiha Ganyat Doda, or Ganyato Anora, Niwa Gita Roda, Dana Swag, and Niwa Dakitani. So my name is Roroya Gewan. Canada Revenue and Taxation knows me as Dan Longboat, and I'm a Mohawk from Grand River Territory in our Turtle Clan. And I'm so happy to be here with you this morning, and got a very short period of time to cover a lot of history. So I just wanted to be able to thank the organizers for the invitation, and hope that you will benefit from some of the things that we're going to share with you today. So real quickly, I'm going to cover a couple of really important pieces as the important context for the work that we're doing. So a long time ago, when the Europeans first came into our territory in 1613, there was a treaty that was settled and established between the early Dutch and our people, the Haudenosaunee, and so the Six Nations people. And we refer to that as Gaswengta, or Turo Wampum Belt. That belt signifies two paths sailing down the river of life, two canoes. One is a canoe, one is a sailboat. And inside of each one is our respective cultures, our language, our laws, our spirituality, our people, all the things that make us distinct nations of people. It was agreed upon, by the early Dutch in 1613. In the 1640, when slightly after that, when the Dutch and the European, the French had a bit of a falling out. The French came in and they accepted this Turo Wampum Belt as well. When in the 1670s, when France and England had their little bout, The English came into our territory, and they also accepted it. 1776, when the Americans established their government, and they established the 13 colonies, they also accepted this belt. 1867, when Canada became a nation, they also accepted this belt. Added to that, in the 1670s was this belt. They oftentimes refer to this as a Silver Covenant chain, or let me see if I can get this right, Silver Covenant chain, or the Friendship Treaty belt. It signifies a European and an Indigenous person, and the linkage between them are three principles of peace, friendship, and respect, and how that they link together. Our point behind this is that, from the earliest times, our concern has been for the welfare of the river of life itself. As these two vessels that we had talked about earlier, the canoe and the sailboat, sailed on the river of life, it is in our interest of all of us living here to be able to care for the river of life. And as we all know today, the river of life is in trouble. And as you are all aware, living in the Great Lakes Basin, in particular Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, this is the most heavily populated and densest population in North America. And the impact on water, the impact on the bioregion, the impact on the ecosystems and on biodiversity is tremendous. And so part of the process that we wanted to share is really trying to create this opportunity to bring knowledge perspectives together. As you'll know, and I hope that you're aware, on this coming Monday is the Day of Truth and Reconciliation, and honoring the residential school survivors as well as the ones that didn't make it from residential school, and providing that opportunity to be able to recognize them, to honor them, to celebrate them, and at the same time to learn about the truth, as to what happened. As we move towards that date, it becomes critically important that we also realize that the impact that we've had on the natural world, not just Indigenous peoples, but on the natural world itself, is continuing to grow, and the negative impact. And we have an opportunity now to be able to turn that and to change that. What we're professing then is, the opportunity to bring Indigenous knowledge and science together to be able to talk about how we move this forward. As we oftentimes talk about within our classes, as an example, is that this has been the most complex issues that human beings have had to face currently in the world. No time in a human history have we had to face such complexity in terms of all of those issues. And if you're all into environmental issues and environmental science, you know them well. Issues around the loss of biodiversity, the extinction of species, loss of habitat, issues around global contaminants, issues around our water, all those things that work, that are impacting our well-being. And as Susan talked about, in terms of our health and our well-being, degraded systems of environment equal degraded systems of health and well-being. And so that health and well-being is not just talking about physical health, it's also talking about mental, emotional, and spiritual health as well. So part of the process that we need to address is that, and using the words of my good friend David Newhouse, who was the former chair of the Channing Winjack School for Indigenous Studies here at Trent University, David oftentimes talks about that the necessity of Canadians not having the opportunity to reconcile with the land, never had the opportunity to fully connect with the land and to understand, what our sacred relationship is. So by bringing forward Indigenous teachings, Indigenous perspectives, we are better enabled to understand, our deep connection to it, our dependency upon it, even understanding, how we name it, in a simple process that we use in providing names. We refer to our physical mother as Agetni Staha. Her to me is the one that gave me life. We change that and make it Yetini Staha. Change the pronoun, it means her to all of us has given us life. And so that simple understanding then, in terms of what the earth provides for us, necessitates that we have a certain type of behavior like we do for our physical mother. We love, care, honor, take care of, support, respect our physical mother is the same behavior that we need to reflect and to create in the time that we have now on Earth. As human beings, we have to recognize that the Earth has provided for us. So when she not only, has enabled us to survive and to live, but she's given us all the things necessary for us to have a beautiful life. I love the way Anishinaabe people talk about that in terms of, Bomatswin, when they talk about, the good life. All the things necessary for us to be able to enjoy life surround us. They're all here for us. And so all we have to do is take the time to recognize them and to honor them and to take care of them. So part of the struggle that we want to talk about, is really beginning a process of respecting what our great ancestors were able to create together in terms of this two-row science, reflecting our unique ways of being, bringing those forward and being able to work together to be able to take care of the river of life. As you all are aware, the face of Canadian society is changing. No longer is it just your neo-European backgrounds. It reflects people from all over the world. And when we talk about, the ability to utilize and to engage multiple systems of knowledge and to bring those together to reflect upon how we understand and how we live in the world is going to be critically important going forward. The point of it is that these complex issues that we all face will demand complex thinking. And in order to achieve complex thinking, we need to be able to bring knowledge systems, different perspectives, create true collaboration, mutual benefit, respectful relationships, to bring those together to be able to talk about how we move forward. Many of the principles that our great ancestors were able to decipher and to be able to use, when they created this ancient treaty belt in 1613, come from our original instructions that we were given during creation of the human beings and creation of the world. And so our understanding of that is that we have a sacred responsibility to care for what the Creator has provided for us, and that our environment, our sacred place of being, will continue as long as we continue to look after it. But the time that we stop, many of the things will become degraded, many things will become extinct, and things will begin to disappear. And how we understand it is that they go back to the Creator. So for us, then, this process and what we're talking about here is a fulfillment of prophecy. Not only, are we enabled to be able to understand, the distant past and the origins of creation, the origins of the natural world, but more specifically, it brings us into the present to understand through thousands of generations of human beings. It enables us to be able to understand what our sacred responsibilities are from those ancient teachings. And so I want to make it clear that, we're not, we're oftentimes relegated to being a historical or living in the past. We're a historical people. Our history, our ancient culture, our practices, excuse me, all those things that we've been given have helped us to form the foundation of a culture that has enabled the natural world to flourish, and at the same time, our cultures to flourish. And those two things, our cultures and our ways of life and the natural environment, are fused together. They have enabled not only the biodiversity to flourish, but also more specifically our cultures and our peoples to be able to flourish as well. So this land, in a Tkaronto bioregion, has been shared by many Indigenous nations throughout time. I was fortunate enough as a young student to be able to participate in an archaeological dig, and we were able to find remains of ancient longhouse structures that are over 9,000 years old. Seneca longhouse structures are on Casaloma, which at the time was the shores of a lake, what they referred to as Lake Iroquois. So, to go back to that time, our cousins, the Hurons inhabited this country, then the settlement of the Anishinaabe people, the Mississauga nations, came and lived here as well. Now it's the home for many people all around the world in terms of Indigenous peoples, Indigenous nations, and other nations all around the world have now, chose to make that area our home. So this necessity of reconciling with the land, touchstoning the land, understanding the importance of caring for the land as we care for ourselves and as we care for each other are fundamental in understanding about how we move forward. So we use these ancient teachings, we use the perspectives, the practices, the cultural precepts, the principles and values that come out of them. We put them into today's framework and we utilize them and put them to work and begin to help us understand what our responsibility is and how we need to move forward and what our essential behavior is it necessitates. And at the same time, then we utilize the tools of science and technology to help to restore, to repair, to undo many of the stressors and much of the damage that has been done, from our lack of connection to the natural environment. And so as we move forward into the future, the ability to engage multiple perspectives of knowledge and to develop innovation out of complexity is going to be the greatest opportunity, for us to be able to, how would we say that, engage with, to employ, to work for it to come to fruition. And so that becomes our lifelong work. And as Susan talks about, that work is going to take a few centuries moving forward. It's going to take, much of the work that we see here. And as she mentioned, she's right that many of us, you may not see the fruits of our labor, but what we are able to accomplish now sets in motion that much less that the generations ahead of us will have to acquire. And as we become, ancestors to those future generations, they'll look back at us and be able to say, that was my uncle, that was my grandfather, that was my grandmother, that was my auntie, that was my mother, that was my father, that made the pivotal change for good, that made the pivotal change that enabled us to be able to have clean air, clean water, abundant wildlife, to have sustenance and food that has created health and well-being for us, that enabled us to be able to have a rich natural environment that will continue as long as time goes on. Sometimes, I'm kind of mindful of the time, but if you ever get a chance to get an email from me, and I got to tell you right off the bat, I'm not very good at email, but I have a little footer on the bottom of my email, and the footer talks about this idea that, and you all are aware of, that saying that has been attributed to the Chinese philosopher some 2,000 years ago, Lao Tzu. And Lao Tzu talks about this idea that, and we all are aware of it, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for his lifetime. What we're talking about here when we talk about the employment of Indigenous knowledge is we're talking about you teach a human being their sacred responsibility to fish, and you'll have fish and human beings until the end of time. And that's kind of where we're at today in utilizing and engaging with multiple perspectives of knowledge, moving this agenda forward. Much of the things that Susan talked about in terms of our understanding of the choices that we have to make in terms of the two paths that have been laid out in front of us, talks about the idea that, we have a choice as human beings if we want to, live that scorched earth path, or whether we want to live, that beautiful narrow green path that the Creator had provided for us in the care and function and the relationship with the natural world and the abundancy of that. And I can tell you that from our understanding of that within traditional teachings, they talk about that if we choose one, then all the choices that we make always have consequences. If we choose one, then get ready for pain, hardship, and suffering. If we decide to choose the Creator's path and caring for nature and caring for the things that we have been given and trusted to, then what we're talking about is that we will continue to enjoy health, happiness, peace, and love. And so the choice is ours in how we want to move forward. But I would say that if we're going to do something, and again, it is employed with all of us, that we have the choice of whether we want to get engaged and make positive change in the world and to become those ancestors that our future generations can look back on and smile and say, that was my relatives that made the change, or not. Or we can continue to do and degrade and damage the natural world and each other and the relationships that we have, and continue to see the degradation of human health as well as the natural world. And so it's our choice about what we want to do. So I'm urging all of us, to be able to work together, to share our knowledge, to engage, to make positive change for the future generations of not just the human beings, but the future generation of all things, and to engage, in processes that are respectful, are mutually beneficial, are based in equity, and at the same time then has enabled to human beings, and in particular Canadians as well as Indigenous nations, to be able to work together, to be able to create a type of Canada that we can all uphold as a valued nation that is enabled teachings, relationships to the natural world, the recovery, the restoration of ecological degradation, the well-being of human beings, the history, the sustenance, the future, for future generations to uphold and to look back at us and say that was the pivotal time.
Our next speaker does a fantastic job at the global systemic level. In fact, I think he's one of the best systems thinkers in the world today. He has a background in earth system science, cultural evolution, cognitive science and complexity, co-founder of the Design School for Regenerating Earth, and author of the Design Pathway for Regenerating Earth. He now lives in Barichara, Colombia, where he's helping to regenerate a 500,000 hectare bioregion. Please welcome Joe Brewer.
What I want to do right now is be sure we have a shared understanding of one thing. The thing that I want to share, and I'm going to spend the next few minutes on, is why bioregional scale? Why do we have to work at this seemingly impossible scale if we can't even fix our damn sidewalks? Right? Like, we have these piecemeal problems we can't solve for the very reason that Susan said. Problem-solution mindsets don't work. We have to live into the whole system. And that's what I want to spend just a couple minutes. This is going to be the whirlwind tour. And it starts where I think we should always start, which is to look at our mother. To look at our mother and notice that you can't cut her into portions. You can't divvy out little pieces of her separate from the rest of her. That if you cut her to pieces, she dies because she is wholly and completely integrated. There is not a single boundary in this image. Even if you look at the dark edges of the earth, if you looked in the infrared, you would see the magnetosphere. You would start to see that it doesn't even have a boundary there. And if I was to ask you on this image of the earth, is there any place in that image that does not have water? No. Because there's water in the oceans, in the clouds, and vapor moving in the air, continually circulating and bringing life to a living planet. And that interdependent web creates two things: deeply interdependent resilience and profoundly interdependent systemic risk. And by understanding this double-edged awareness of risk, resilience, and interdependence, we see the path forward. When we ask ourselves, what is the state of the world today? And I think many of you have seen me talk about this. One way to answer what's going on with the world today is to take an Earth systems lens and say there are these different systems of the Earth. The tectonic plates move around, the oceans circulate and mix things, and there's all kinds of Earth systems processes. And when a group of about 3,500 Earth system scientists came together, and they asked, are there any boundaries that if we crossed those boundaries, we would leave the warm, stable period called the Holocene and our idea of stable population centers, of civilizations, of things that depend on that stability, that those things will just go into question or go away. They ask that question and they come up with the answer that there are 9 critical thresholds. By the way, the thresholds could change if one of them is connected to another, way more complex picture. But there are these 9 thresholds that if you crossed even one, the idea of civilization becomes a question mark into the future. And the more of them you cross, the more questionable it becomes. And so I'm just going to run through them real quick. We all know climate change. Everyone loves to reduce the entire planet to the amount of carbon dioxide molecules to ignore all the rest. So climate change is only one of the 9. Biosphere integrity, which is the rate of extinction for our beautiful mass extinction event that we're in right now. It's a lovely thing to watch. Land system change, the primary cause of that extinction, which is to take healthy, intact ecosystems and degrade them and turn them into parking lots, urban landscapes, monoculture crops, and deserts. Freshwater use, because only 1% of the world's water is freshwater, and 99% of that freshwater is dammed and being contaminated in lakes, let alone the groundwater, which is its own whole thing. Biogeochemical flows, which is just a fancy way of saying industrial agriculture uses fertilizer. And fertilizer spreads a whole bunch of reactive nitrogen, which causes our rivers and our oceans to die. They actually call them dead zones, and they're at the mouths of all the major rivers of the earth. Ocean acidification, have too much acidity, all of our calcium carbonate goes away, it dissolves, no more coral reefs, no more complex biodiverse life in the world's oceans. Atmospheric aerosol loading, in other words, pollution. Stratospheric ozone depletion, that protective boundary for ultraviolet radiation that would kill all life on the continents if we didn't have the ozone layer. And then novel entities, ingenious humans creating stupid things that the planet can't handle. So we got 9, and they asked the question, this is like 2013, they were like, oh, so how we doing? Did we cross any? Oh, crap. We crossed 4. That's what they said by 2015 when the peer review research came out. That doesn't mean we crossed them in 2015. That's just when they asked the question and got their answer. In 2015, oh, we crossed 4 of them. But then they keep doing research. A couple years later, oh, we've crossed a few more. Oh, wait, there are these things called microplastics that are in the breast milk of every mother on earth. Maybe those things shouldn't be there. And you see, we've got to picture something like this. What this tells us is that the future is not going to be like the past. That if we keep thinking with the way we thought before, we're only going to get more of this until we are not part of this story anymore. And with this kind of a complex reality of where we are today, we're not going to solve this by changing light bulbs or taking a single occupancy vehicle with an internal combustion engine and replacing it with a single occupancy vehicle that requires us to scrape the ocean floor to get lithium. It's like we have these stupid problem solution ideas. To address this, we have to do what Susan said, which is change the story. And so to change the story, we need to understand what's causing this story. What most people don't know is those planetary boundaries are explained by the tipping points of the Earth system. That the reason those boundaries exist is because when you cross one of those boundaries, you are crossing some of these. I'm going to name a couple. The Amazon rainforest shut down its hydrological pump this year and is in the midst of collapse. Woohoo! I wrote about that in 2020, saying it happened in 2024, and sadly I was right. The Amazon rainforest is collapsing right now. The boreal forest is on fire every year. The Atlantic circulation is shutting down, it's slowing down, it's 15% less than it was in 1980 because the Greenland ice sheet is gushing fresh water so quickly. And oh wait, the West Antarctic ice sheet has little chips breaking off of it. And you start to see, by the way, the permafrost is exploding methane into the atmosphere as the permafrost melts in Siberia. This is not a story of the future. This is a story of systemic interdependence. But here's the secret. If you look at this picture as I'm scared as hell, what is going to happen, you freeze. But if you stop and notice something profound, this picture required millions of human hours of labor to gather the data and the research and the knowledge to tell us how the Earth works. Which means you could use this same knowledge to reconnect the pieces, to restore the stability of Earth system processes, to regenerate the whole damn planet. Everything, everywhere, all at once. That's it. We've got to restore these linkages through healthy relationships across landscape systems across the planet, and the scale of our intervention is bioregions. So, the lesson is this: the Earth is a whole system with cascading consequences, positive and negative. Negative consequences are things like too much CO2, too much warming, too much Greenland ice sheet, shut down the mixing of the Earth's ocean. Right? That's cascading negative consequences. Cascading positive consequences is restore our regional small water cycle with forests and integration and healthy rivers, and do it over here too. And oh my gosh, the jet stream actually connects them to each other. You see the picture now? It's actually possible to regenerate the whole frickin' planet if we think about the whole frickin' planet. But not if we think about carbon dioxide molecules or changing light bulbs or some other reductionistic nonsense. What's amazing about this is because the breakdown unfolds across space and time, the buildup takes place across space and time, which means it's hard to see this story happening. Those of us that were together this week, birthing the Earth Regeneration Fund, we are part of a story no one knows is happening yet. How many other parts of this story are not being told right now of how we're regenerating the Earth? Val and her farm. We were just at this beautiful regenerative farm over near Caledon the other day. How many of us are already part of the new story? It's already happening. And so, this is the insight that I observed that shows how to do this, is that I traveled all over the world looking at regenerative projects, permaculture farms, reforestation, all kinds of cool things, and they all happen like the Kortright Center on its 550 acres of land. It's a plot of land. We tend to divide the world into these little pieces. Oh, there's a plot of land, huh? But that plot of land has got ecological connections. Water flows on, water flows off, air moves over, animals migrate across it. Those ecological connections are organized as holistic landscapes, as watersheds, as regional hydrological cycles, as coastal estuaries. These holistic landscapes are our bioregions. It's the whole life scale. And those are embedded with, in, and help to shape planetary processes. Which means, what's the scale that you work at? Trick question. All of them at once by focusing on the connections between them. I've got my little plot of land, but my neighbors across the fence have a plot of land. We're ecologically connected. Maybe we should collaborate. Maybe we should organize management around a watershed. Sound like a conservation authority, anyone? And then we could actually get up to the scale of holistic landscapes. And if our landscapes talk to each other, which nature already does, if humans did it too, then we could go, here in Toronto area, we could help regenerate all of the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes are connected to, the Mississippi River Basin, which is connected to the Gulf of Mexico. Oh, damn, those things aren't separated. We get to the planet. And so, just a quick, fly through. Here's Turtle Island, AKA North America. And you're like, that's this big thing. And you're like, all of the moisture of this thing comes from here, right? The Pacific Ocean, dropping snowpack on the Rocky Mountains, bringing the Alberta air down to the Midwest. Oh, as if the Canadian border matters to air. Air doesn't care about that. And when you look at that, like, okay, so here we are, and where we are is organized. It's structured. We're in the largest concentration of fresh water on Earth, a giant basin called the Great Lakes. When we zoom in on those Great Lakes, we're like, that's a lot of cool structure. And we're right there, right? Because the Great Lakes are all connected to each other. Like, that's so interesting. We zoom in more, and like here we are at the Kortright, right in there, in the middle of the GTB. Like, maybe what we're doing right here is powerful because it's not only right here, because it's organized at these large scales. And so this is I've said this in previous talks, some of you have heard this, but I want to review. land is organized by its natural organizing patterns. And when you look at the shape of land, you'll see the land has information that is shaped in particular ways. If this was like a watershed, for example, every watershed on Earth has a unique geologic history, has a unique history of the movement of tectonic plates, of the sedimentation and the erosion patterns. They make that place unlike any other place, even if they're universal patterns of creation. And those are connected to the unique kind of life that can live in that place. In this place, you have these beautiful forests, these wonderful moraines, this incredible absurdity of water that you have here. Like the amount of water is nuts that's happening in Ontario. Your ecological history is unique in this place. It's unlike anywhere else. You go out to Colorado, it's not the same as here, right? You go over to Siberia, not the same as here. And every place, if humans have lived in that place, there's a unique cultural history. When you put these things together, you get this amazing thing, the story of your place. You're already in the story of this place. And by being in the story of this place and constructing this history, you start to see health and flourishing. Oh, this was a place where ecosystems were amazing and there were fish in all the rivers and the lakes and humans were here. They used canoes because, damn, if you walk too much, you end up running into water. You might as well have canoes. And they had all these ways that they lived here, right? And you can learn from that to say, I think we have an understanding holistically of how this place works from that history, which gives you the ability to imagine futures that are regenerative and flourishing for this place, but only at the scale of the whole life context, right? The whole life context. When you look at that geologic history, you'll notice that Niagara Escarpment, which most people on Earth, I didn't, I'm from the Midwest, I grew up in Missouri. What's the Niagara Escarpment? You guys here, you should be sure every kid in school knows what that thing is, because that is damn cool. That's why we have the Great Lakes. So, this ability to see the story that you're already a part of is to think bioregionally, to see the geographic range of life for your place. And so, just real quickly, how do you organize around natural patterns? That's Eugene, Oregon. You can see where the degradation is. It's in the watersheds, it's in the river valleys. If I was to ask you, where would you want to restore the health and well-being? It's pretty obvious. It's in the floodplains. They turned forest into agriculture. And you look at this middle one, that's about like 10 miles long, so like 16 kilometers. That's a human scale of organizing. So you can imagine a group of humans, people coming together across these 20 or 30 pieces of land, creating a framework of collaboration and regenerating that valley. But, woohoo, reality is nested in scale. So if you go out to a bigger scale, I've turned it sideways, north is there. This is the Willamette Valley in Western Oregon. And like, how would you regenerate that massive thing that's 160 kilometers north to south? And the answer is the same way. You'd organize these smaller scale landscape features and you just parallel and replicate them around. But then you look at something huge like the Columbia River Basin, big as the Colorado River Basin, about the size of the Great Lakes. It's freaking huge. How would you regenerate that? Oh, well, there's the Willamette Valley. And you start to see these nested levels are about parallel collaboration, about repeating human scale processes of organizing and managing in parallel, nested within and across scales of a system. And then you start to see that you could organize an entire continent this way. And now we're talking about how to really regenerate the Earth. And so the lesson here is that landscapes show us how to organize ourselves. We organize ourselves into bioregional frameworks, or said another way, we look at how the land gives rise to life, and we just do that. We just do that. And we put ourselves inside of it. And so you can imagine this as a mycelial web spreading across North America or Turtle Island, or across South America, across the whole planet. And that's the idea that I wanted to share with you, is that for us to know how to organize the regeneration of the planet, to live into that story, we need to understand how life already organizes us, and then just go from there.
The Toronto Foundation was established 40 years ago and is home to 995 plus community-minded philanthropists. I'd like to call on Mohamed, Director of Community Impact at the Toronto Foundation, to say a few words. Thank you.
I want to start by sharing something I think is somewhat embarrassing about myself. An embarrassing truth about myself, at least maybe to an audience like this. I have shocking gaps in basic knowledge about nature and the environment. I don't know why it rains, how bees pollinate, certainly very little knowledge or shallow knowledge about how ecosystems function. You know, I grew up in Toronto all my life and went to school here, and sorry to say, Joe, I don't know what the Niagara Escarpment is. I think, you know, at my core, I'm an urbanite. I think I'm more comfortable in city streets and the built environment than in nature. And as a result, I think I'm drawn to issues discussing social systems than natural systems, because that's what I know. But of course, the truth is the two are interrelated. You know, I've been working in philanthropy for nearly half my career. In the past few years at Toronto Foundation, which is a community foundation, a unique form of philanthropy where, as Brian mentioned, sort of local donors pool their resources together towards collective impact. Two defining characteristics about community foundations that I think is relevant for a forum like today. We are fundamentally place-based and issue-agnostic. And in the first case, we're focused in a defined area and are interested in how to improve the conditions of people living in that area. And historically, or traditionally, that's meant community foundations operate at a city level. But increasingly, I think it's involving more and more collaboration with our peers in neighboring jurisdictions. And so I appreciate how the forum really compels us to think about the regional perspective. And in the second case, being issue agnostic means that we take a broad view of how change occurs. You know, we'll fund across domains from the arts to the environment to social services and the environment. And by doing so, we don't necessarily have a prescribed theory of change nor invested in moving the needle on a particular issue. Or particularly one issue. You know, we see it all as a whole. And why this conversation is fascinating to me is because I think what we're trying to do is attempting to tie these disparate issues together and draw out some of these interdependencies. And because we're issue agnostic, I think it also informs our granting philosophy as well. And I know we're going to speak about funding flows later this afternoon. At the foundation, at least, we're less interested in project funding with targeted outcomes and favor more unrestricted giving and funding to build capacity of charities and hopefully build up the charitable sector as a whole. Like many of you at Toronto Foundation, we're also interested in systems change, initiatives that cut across sectors and try to address the root causes of intractable issues, social, environmental, and cultural issues, and the kind of work that brings together actors and different key interest holders across sectors. Also brings us together with other funders as well. And I'll end with an example of what I think illustrates that power of collaboration. Over the past several years, our foundation's been studying the concept of social capital quite intensely. You know, we embarked on the largest ever research project on the topic, surveying nearly 4,000 Torontonians to learn about the vibrancy of our social networks and the extent to which trust and reciprocity exist within communities and our connection to place and civic engagement. You know, we understood social capital as an essential lubricant that makes it possible for societies to not only function but also flourish, enabling people to work together in an increasingly polarized and disruptive world. It's one of those rare cross-cutting measures, I think, that's as relevant to arts organizations as it is to mental health experts, as it is to environmental activism. And it's because of that, I think, the project brought together 17 different partners. We had private sector developers, we had think tanks, we had a government agency, we had the YMCA, the United Way, and the Toronto Zoo all working together on this project, which I think is quite fascinating. I think telling to this idea of social capital as it brings people together. And it's the kind of potential that I think I imagined when I first learned about the forum and the work of the Legacy Project. And I'm excited to see where our conversations take us today. I now want to introduce our next speaker, Martin Kirk, Program Director at NoVo Foundation. Established in 2006, the NoVo Foundation supports initiatives that promote a holistic and healing vision for humanity with a focus on bioregional work that supports the reintegration of human and natural systems. Jennifer and Peter Buffett are the co-presidents of the foundation and co-chair of the board of directors. Martin.
I wanted to start with where we start from, what our basic worldview is. And I will say a lot of it aligns very deeply with what we've heard today. We try to take the very long view, the civilizational view, if you like. And one of the ways we describe this is we believe we're coming to the end of a 500-year civilizational arc, and the next one is just beginning now. So our job is to think about what civilization can be and start to plant the seeds of that now. It's not going to come into place in any simple way. It's not going to come into place until the old civilization creates space for it. And I don't know how many people around here are very familiar with the concept of the meta-crisis or the polycrisis. People talk about collapse a lot these days. I don't like that word collapse. I think it presents the wrong mental image for us. I think more in terms of decoherence. Things will just slowly start to stop working. But it's in the truth of systems, things change slowly, and then all at once. So that's why people think of collapse, because there is this sense that things can happen very quickly. But still, I prefer the term decoherence because it just seems more accurate to me. I had here the question, why bioregionalism? I don't think I need to go there. I think we've had much better people than I describing why. But I do want to just pull up a point that both Susan and Joe made, actually, that we can think of bioregionalism and it sounds big and it sounds daunting. But in truth, it is the smallest unit at which this work can be done. So I want to just kind of disabuse the kind of scale thing and say, when we look at the planet, when we look at change, this is the smallest unit we should be working at. We've only started this in really work in the last year. We only started granting in earnest in January this year. And this is going to be a global portfolio of ours. And it's conceived of as a sister portfolio to our biggest portfolio, which is supporting Indigenous communities, largely in North America, but some in South America, a couple in Australia. And for all the reasons Dan talked about, we are building this bioregional portfolio, which is largely oriented, and like the language itself is largely oriented to fit into Western scientific minds or scientifically trained minds, and bring that together and rather open up the channels of collaboration and communication with all the Indigenous work that we do already. Because as Dan was saying, with the wampum belt, it is the two that create the capacities that we need. And they have to work in harmony. It's not one telling the other what to do, it's them both finding their roles. So the 5 regions we've started in, and this is just where we're starting, is Cascadia, GTB, the Amazon headwaters, England, Europe, and Ireland, and what am I forgetting? No, it was Amazon headwaters. But and Amazon headwaters and the work Joe's doing in the high Andes as well. So why GTB? Why did we choose here to start with? The first thing that snagged our attention was the 20% of the Earth's fresh water. There's geostrategic importance here. If this water isn't well protected, then the entire planet suffers. And as we know, with migration patterns that are going to, if we think we're seeing migration now, you wait. And so this area is going to be an area that attracts a lot of people. And so we have to get this right now if we're going to withstand what's coming. There's also been incredible leadership here. From the 90s, whether it's David Crombie, or today with Brian and Susan, we really see leadership happening here. And that's an incredible resource for the world right now. The thinking that's been done here is long and deep, and people need to learn from it and watch what's been happening. So that's why we've come here and we've started funding here, because we believe in the leadership and we believe in the importance of this place. I want to talk a little bit, picking up what Mohamed said, really, how we do the funding and why we do it that way. Similar to Toronto Foundation, we try to give multi-year general operating support as much as possible. And the reason we do it that way is because, this is my first job in philanthropy. I was always on the other side of the table. And I've spent many years reporting on outcomes and metrics and all this sort of thing. And what it felt like to me at that time was that the funders were basically buying our outcomes and directing them and putting their own their kind of spin on them. But that itself is a piecemeal way of thinking, because precious little of the work that I saw then, and it's changing, thank goodness, but precious little was truly systemic in its thinking. And people were trying to fix bits of this, bits of that, without seeing the whole. And the only people who really see the whole, in general terms, are the people who are in place doing the work, and people who have already gone on that journey to shift from a mechanical, linear way of thinking to a systemic way of thinking. And so who are we to set the metric out and the outcomes? For us to think that we can do that is an act of incredible hubris, especially when we're thinking about a global portfolio, especially when we're not of those places. And so the way we think about it, more general operating, more long-term support, releases the genius of place. So our job is to do this, not that. So we believe, philanthropy, we go back to the original etymology, is love of people. And that's what we try to express, which means that we can't be precious about the money. We have the money, as I think Susan said, has to flow like water. In a way, we can be all biomimicry philanthropists. Look at the way the resources flow in nature and let our resources flow in that same sort of way. Learn from nature, do it the way she does it. Also, I was having this wonderful conversation the other day with a guy called Joel from this group called Regenesis. And he said something to me that just, sometimes you have a conversation that just flips a little switch in your mind. And this is not a dramatic revelation in some ways, but it clarified something for me in a really nice way. And that when we talk about environmental work often, the underpinning instinct or the underpinning frames of that story are stop doing bad things. Which means we just need to figure out how to sit and be good. As if there's a backward move. We stop action. We retreat in some way. And I want to suggest, and this is what Joel suggested to me, it's actually the opposite of that. To do what Joe's suggesting, to work at the bioregional level, we have to become smarter. Not less active, more active. And we have to blend, which is one of the core drivers of the problems with this system, is we are extremely smart but very unwise. And the things that we have to do are bring smartness and wisdom together, and that's hard. Because we all unlearned how to be wise in many ways with the sort of education processes and systems that we went through. We were all taught linear thinking. We were all taught that you can predict what one thing comes after the next. And that's not how life works. And again, that's why the metrics and the outcomes is an unwise approach, because it pretends there is control and it pretends that's how life happens. And so what we try to do, again, is it's not us being wise or us being smart, but it's finding where the wisdom and the ability to bring smartness and wisdom together exist. And again, that's why we have to bring. And there's a sort of romanticization that happens, and I'm sure you've all known it and feel it, around Indigenous communities. We talk about Indigenous wisdom. And there's a subtle hierarchy created with that. And that's not what the prophecies talk about, the Indigenous prophecies. It's not what Dan talks about. He doesn't talk about this. The Wampum Belt doesn't show that. It shows this. So it's about bringing two life ways together, not unwisdom and wisdom, but two life ways, two ways of thinking, two experiences, sets of experiences together. And I'll finish with one of my favorite quotes from Wes Jackson. Probably lots of you are familiar with Wes Jackson, the work of the Lands Institute over many years. And he says, right now, we're a species out of context. We've removed ourselves from the context that allows us to live sustainably and in harmony in this world. And our job, and what bioregionalism does, is bring us back into context, into the context of which life flourishes.
And right now I want to tell you another story that's related to the GTB story, and it's the story of the Earth Regeneration Fund. If you're worried about, like, wow, this sounds hard to organize our bioregion, it sounds like it'd be really difficult to create a funding ecosystem that could support the regeneration of the entire GTB, like that's huge. I'm like, well, that's okay, because we got your back. We got your back because you're already in relationship with other bioregions, even if you didn't know it yet. So the idea of the Earth Regeneration Fund is to take what I was saying this morning, that there's this interdependent web of relationships across the Earth as a living system, the dynamic relationships of the Earth. And those relationships, which includes the movement of air, the cycling of nutrients, the basics, right? All of that brings us together in the opportunity to tell a story. And the story is a story of two levels of activity happening together like a concert. At one level, within our cultural identities connected to our places, we start to live out a web of relationships. We start to live into holistic health and well-being. Cascadia, which roughly is the Pacific Northwest, it's got more specific definition than that. They have been cultivating their bioregional identity as Cascadia for decades. They held their first Congress in 1986 in Olympia. And I was born in Missouri around the time of the first Bioregional Congress on Earth, the Ozarks Bioregional Congress. That took place in 1981, but started planning in 1977. And so there is a history of this movement that actually gave rise to the most sophisticated parts of the environmental movement in the last half century. It just got sidestepped by other stories, but the story never ended. The idea of the Earth Regeneration Fund is to form a network of relationships about how we finance the regeneration of our bioregions in concert with other bioregions. So that if you're curious what they've been learning in Cascadia for the last 40 or 50 years, you'll get to learn because they're figuring this out too. And so this idea of creating a network of funding ecosystems is the idea behind the Earth Regeneration Fund. And this is where we're starting. Now, we're working with more bioregions than these, but these are the ones that already have an organizing team, that have some level of infrastructure and capacity, that are mapping local social actors and regenerative projects and beginning to bring them into a narrative and strategy for their bioregion. And they want to learn together how financial flows work in that effort. And so, the Cascadia Bioregional Funding Ecosystem, maybe it'll be called the Cascadia Regeneration Fund or something like that, but they're working on it. The Ogallala, has anyone here heard of the Ogallala Aquifer? The most important groundwater supply on Earth? It's the water underneath the Great Plains. 2 billion humans get their food from it, and it's going to run out of water in a couple years. Just think about that one. Ooh. And so the Ogallala needs to be regenerated. That involves restoring indigenous lifeways, bringing the bison back, doing watershed restoration, changing the whole agricultural model of the breadbasket of North America. Anyway, the Ogallala is a story about regenerating basically the water underneath the Great Plains. Barichara, that's where I live and work, where we're restoring a tropical dry forest and a regional climate system in the middle of the northern Andes. But I have extra free time, so I'm also helping birth the Northern Andes Regeneration Fund with a network of 10 territories in Colombia, each of which either has created or is in the process of creating their own community foundation to have a movement of territorial scale foundations regenerating the Northern Andes together. And they received their first funding to start practicing a few months ago. And then there's the forest of the Northeast. I don't know if you've ever driven between Maine and New York and noticed that the forest just doesn't stop. It's the same damn forest. And so the forests of the Northeast, which we have a few of our friends here in the audience who are helping to organize that, are developing strategies for all the incredible work in Connecticut and Massachusetts and New York and in Vermont and New Hampshire and Maine in those forests to regenerate them. And then there's the GTB. You're already part of the story. So the idea is that what we can learn in your urban, rural environment, in this incredibly complex landscape, what you do with institutions like conservation authorities, we don't have those in Colombia, right? But we can learn from you, and you can learn from us, and we can do this together. And the idea is to build a planetary network, starting with this as our seed kernel for the patterns of relationships. And so we started, like I said, yesterday. Really, 4 days ago, yesterday, we got to the moment of where we're kicking off the Earth Regeneration Fund in the Greater Tkaronto Bioregion by gathering representatives from these landscapes here to envision our basic agreements together. And then we're going to have, throughout the next year, a series of immersions. Brian and Susan will talk about the first of those in November here, where we're going to be designing funding ecosystems and then learning from each other across these bioregions as a learning network, so that we can prototype these different diverse models all together in the next year. You probably noticed there's not much time to waste, so we might as well just get started. These are pictures from the last 3 days. Val will recognize her yurt. Val's going to speak in a few minutes. This is out at Heartwood Farm. Here we are at the Cedars, which is where the Legacy Project is located. What you can see is as we gather and have these conversations, we come to realize we have agency and authorship. And I want to distinguish between authority and authorship. Authority is you're granted the power to author. You can author laws. Well, authorship is the ability to live your story. This is authorship. This group of people came together and said, we're doing this, damn it. And we're doing it. And so my partner Penny and I, this is the Beaver River and the Oak Ridges Moraine. Isn't it lovely? It's a picture we took yesterday. At the Design School for Regenerating Earth, we've been supporting learning exchanges between bioregions for about 1.5 years now. And we're getting decent at it, learning how to help support people to do it. And so we decided, since we have the discretion to use the funding that we receive to do whatever the hell we want because the funder that supports us trusts us, that we're giving $125,000 into this fund to get started, which is going to be distributed as seed funding into 5 of the landscapes. So basically, what we're doing is coming together, and one of the things we decided yesterday was how do we allocate this funding to the different bioregions in the network so we could practice. It's better to practice small. It's better to practice small. And so we realized that we should give $25,000 each to 5 of the bioregions, because the Northern Andes is already connected with Barichara. Barichara is prototyping structures for the Northern Andes. And then we're going to start practicing how do we allocate this funding and how do we support each other between our bioregions as we do it. So it's begun. We're starting. And what we're building is platforms for bioregional regeneration. So we had a learning journey earlier this year on birthing of bioregional learning centers so that we could have a network of learning centers, a network of learning ecosystems all over the world, each of them working on regenerating its own bioregion. And during that learning journey, we revealed that to create a bioregional learning center, you also have to create funding and governance systems to fund it and to make decisions and to allocate resources within the bioregion, and that you have to build a knowledge commons for your bioregion so you have holistic and collective understanding. We've been doing it in Barichara for about 5 years, and I just want to briefly give you a feel for what a funding ecosystem is. Funding ecosystem, like I said, is a story and a web of relationships organized as an ecosystem. So if you look at what we're doing in Barichara, Colombia, Barichara is right up there in the middle of it. It's a very degraded landscape. Is that there are different site-based projects in the landscape doing different things, and we build relationships between the humans. And then the humans are like, maybe we should restore this stream bed. Maybe we should do that together. Maybe we should change how we do education for kids. Maybe we should have different economic models. Maybe we should create a community currency. I don't know, lots of fun stuff. But what we need to do is be an ecosystem of relationships. And the funding ecosystem is all of the ways that value flows in this ecosystem. And so, if you want to learn more about the Earth Regeneration Fund, you can go here or here. It's on the Bioregional Earth website. And we're going to be telling the story of how humanity is living into bioregional existence using the story of Bioregional Earth, which is not an organization. It's a story. And so you, right now, are part of the story. And here and next, we're going to continue the story.
We're creating a bioregional funding ecosystem in the GTB for social and ecological regeneration for ecopsychosocial well-being. Susan described, we talk about growing a tree of life, and you can see the social and ecological regeneration, all the themes in the top crown, and the fractal scale linking around the bioregion. The bioregion is the difference that makes a difference. We're using the dynamics of people, generations, and community, and in place, community in bioregion. The tree is a dream, a theory of change, if you will. What does it look like in reality? How does it manifest? To be truly systemic, it has to be everything, everywhere, all at once, looking at relearning our ways of thinking and being, weaving together real projects on the ground and in the community, and using collaborative, community-based decision-making for financial and value flows. So this is how the GTB Bioregional Funding Ecosystem is taking shape. We have at the top of the diagram in the clouds, the 7th-generation Bioregional Funding Ecosystem. So as has been said, it's not just money, it's all forms of capital, be it material, experiential, intellectual, social, cultural, spiritual, living time. We know we have enormous social capital in our communities. We know we have enormous knowledge, particularly in older adulthood, those that are retired and do have some time that they could devote to community and to stewardship. On the left is the Bioregional Learning Center. So this is all about knitting together all of the great learning sites that we already have. This whole thing, it's not about duplicating anything that we have. We have some wonderful things, but they're all disconnected. The conservation authorities, the 13 in the GTB, all have outdoor education centers, nature-based learning centers. There's numerous hiking trails, as you know, through York Region Forest, through Rouge National Urban Park. We are blessed. But how many people know about all of this? And how can we better integrate all of this together and collaborate better? The Bioregional Learning Center also will knit together how we learn about our place here in the GTB. The universities that are modeling climate impacts on our area, they're part of this. Where you go to learn about the Indigenous history, that's part of this. So the Bioregional Learning Center is all the places here that we learn about our place. So it's a decentralized network that we've pulled together. On the right side, you have various themes running through everything that's happening, informed by the third way, the Western, bringing together Western science and Indigenous knowledge. We actually brought together Joe Brewer and Dan Longboat for a hour-and-a-half conversation about how you bring together Western science and Indigenous knowledge for the third way. And as Dan will say, it's not mix and stir, it's respecting each knowledge system, but bringing them together so that we can chart a path forward. And that's on our website if you want to check that out. It's a really powerful video. So weaving through this, the themes: ecosystem regeneration, regenerative economy. How do we move towards a regenerative local economy? That's going to become more and more important as we go along. Health and healing, education and lifelong learning, children to elders and training, community decision-making. In the bottom, this is all grounded in time, generations, connecting generations in community, young and old, is really important to moving forward. Land, the bioregion as our life place. Let's see the bioregion as our life place. Let's see ourselves again as part of nature. Hashtag change the story. In the center, in the square, just to give you a flavor, and there is incredible overlap between those categories, and there's more than what's in that square, but at the top, the 13 conservation authorities we have. Holistic watershed regeneration. How can we think like a bioregion and do planning from that perspective? We have the Oak Ridges Moraine, Niagara Escarpment, Greenbelt, Rouge National Urban Park. We have all these great natural assets. So what we've done is, over the past year, we've been meeting with senior restoration staff at all 13 conservation authorities. They have all come together. That's incredible when you think about it. They've all come together around this idea of the bioregion, and we can regenerate our bioregion, and we can all work together, and we can build this together. We've talked to them about their funding challenges. We have incredible information about all the challenges that they face, and you'll know many of them. I won't go into them now. We've talked to them about, okay, how do we think like a bioregion? If we have a bioregional funding ecosystem, how do you establish governance? How do you decide how to allocate funding across regeneration projects? And we've begun that conversation, and that's continuing. So then you also have farms. We have an incredible bounty of farmland around the GTBs. Class A, some of the best farmland in Canada, and it's unfortunately still being gobbled up by urban sprawl. And there's been many initiatives to see what can we do differently. Regenerative agriculture, tremendous potential. Great organizations. EFAO is here today. Alice is here today. All kinds of things happening out there. And how can we all work together more effectively? How can we knit together? Val, with her regenerative farm, Clearwater, up near Lake Simcoe with their regenerative farm, they didn't know each other, but they both do education work. So we can be stronger together. How can we support great programs like Alice in expanding? Regenerative business ventures. We've got some great social innovation hubs throughout the GTB. There's Guelph, Toronto, elsewhere. How can we all move towards a more regenerative local economy, particularly around food and food security? On the other side, land trusts. We have some great land trusts in the GTB. Oak Ridges Marine Land Trust, Niagara Escarpment Biosphere Conservancy, they're both here today. We've been talking to the land trust. What are your challenges? And it's not all about money. They need stewardship. They have land, but it has to be monitored. There's invasive species. It's incredible problems that we can help with human capital. And community projects. The Leaf Backyard Tree Planting Program is just in 3 parts of the GTB. How do we help them expand outwards? If you look at all the backyards of all the homeowners in the GTB, that's a huge landscape. Add it all up, that's a huge landscape. How can we help regenerate that? Establishing nature stewards. Toronto Nature Stewards is here today. They have started 3 years ago a great model that's expanding rapidly. How can we take that across the GTB? How can it serve land trusts? Resilience hubs. We're moving into uncharted territory in terms of there are going to be shocks coming because we baked in so much with the planetary boundaries that we're exceeding. How can we build systemic resilience? And it's important when we talk about resilience that it's about resilience for transformation. Not and, but for. Resilience for transformation. We have to be really wise, as Martin pointed out, wise about how we use our monetary capital. If you keep putting money into something that's going to get flooded over and over again, does that make any sense? Is that systemic resilience for transformation? How can we move towards transformation while trying to be as resilient as possible to the shocks that are upcoming? Also, the school community network. We prototyped that last year. Amazing. bringing together young people with older adults in community, their eco clubs, bringing in the local homeowners association, if there is one, the local horticultural society. Each school did a regenerative legacy project at the end of the year. You're going to hear about one shortly. And we're expanding that this year. If you can get schools to be more like community or neighborhood hubs, that's going to be huge for systemic resilience. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of work on that in the past, but it's never really achieved its potential. Social prescribing started in the UK. For those of you who don't know about it, we can take that to the next level, and you're going to hear about that. Connecting to the health system in a way that brings people into community and into nature and into regeneration of our bioregion. Multi-solving, as Elizabeth Solomon calls it, addressing loneliness, anxiety, feeling meaning and purpose, ultimately. So that is our portfolio of potential projects, just a flavor of it. We've asked the Conservation Authority, we're prototyping that now. So all the conservation authorities have given us some sample projects that are unfunded that they feel are priorities, that they need done. And how can we support that? How can we build a funding ecosystem that's catalytic, that unlocks potential, that addresses systemic barriers? We've talked to the Land Trust. What are your needs? What would be catalytic in terms of moving your work forward? Regen Ag, we've talked to them. How can we help that move forward? As I said, there's great work out there. We're not duplicating. We're trying to synergize. We're trying to look at the whole and how can we do things better. So there you have it. And it's not as simple as a pool of projects and a pool of money. It's not about that. It's about something bigger, because there are so many synergies, so many other sources of capital that you can bring into the mix that will help us all move forward in regenerating our bioregion. We'd like to give you an opportunity to meet a few of the people involved that are part of the GTB prototyping of the portfolio projects. So just a tiny taste of the soup that we're cooking. We're going to call up 3 groups of 3 people. They're going to do a 5-minute teaser about what they're doing. So it's not a detailed explanation because we're short on time, but just to give you a flavor. They'll each have 5 minutes to share a little teaser. So I'd like to call up Val Steinmann, Debbe Crandall, and Susan Walmer. Val is co-owner of Heartwood Farm and Cidery. She has a regenerative farm, which has become an important part of the Bioregional Learning Center, especially working with our student eco leaders. The kids were amazed that they could actually stand in a field next to a cow. Like Val, Debbe Crandall has brought regenerative practices and a greater ecological awareness to her farm, now Wolfe Farm. She also brings another perspective on learning to the Bioregional Learning Center with her years of work protecting the Oak Ridges moraine, mapping the moraine, studying the moraine. She's a wealth of knowledge. And that connects into Susan Walmer, who's CEO of the Oak Ridges Moraine Land Trust, because to restore and regenerate land, we need to protect it, ideally stewarding it into the commons so that it can be protected in perpetuity. So I'm going to hand it over to Val, then Deb, then Susan.
Boy, I feel like I am in the right room. I am so moved by what's been going on here. And I'm so grateful for all of you who are doing the big picture bird's eye work for our bioregion and for the planet. And I'm here as the main farmer at Heartwood Farm. You've been enjoying, maybe some of you, the products of Heartwood Cidery, which was started by my husband, Brent, a little company that gets the word about regeneration out into the world through conversations in your glass. And I'm here, though, because of the 40-acre place-based plot of land that we call Heartwood, that for the last 20 years has been our family home. And I'm speaking from the perspective not so much of the bird, but of the ant. I'm on the ground as a farmer on our little farm, and I always feel more comfortable speaking with the farm beside me because it fills in so many of the gaps between my words. But we have been inspired by nature's example. And what if we didn't just retire marginal farmland to put it back to nature, but what if our farms actually were modeled on native ecosystems? So on our farm, we have very diverse hedgerows of fruit trees and nut trees and pollinator wildflowers planted on the contour of our hilly landscape. And in the alleyways between, we graze cattle, and I move the fences twice a day, which keeps me fit and sane. And we have chickens and sheep and llamas. They are my co-workers to remediate the landscape. And that little farm has, I like to say, specialized in diversity. And the biggest product of the farm is stories. And I feel like the talk of the power of stories resonates deeply for me. And we have the privilege of welcoming many different groups of people and individuals, like we did in the yurt on Tuesday with this bioregional powerhouse of folks, to experience the ecological parables of the land and to understand that we as humans need to weave ourselves back into the sacred web of life, and that we can do that in how we grow food. But as we know, one little 42-acre plot of land, even stewarded to the best of our ability, and I hope I live long enough to do right by the little piece of land that we call home. That little 42 acres is a proverbial drop in the watershed bucket. So a really important part of what our work is social regeneration within our ecological landscape in our hyper-local community, connecting farmers in our neighborhood. And I'm not talking about, sorry, I need a drink of water. I'm not talking just about farmers who think the same as I do or who believe the same as I do. We have realized that if we're going to regenerate our landscape, we need to build relationships with farmers of all scales and all management systems. That is hard work, it's messy work, but I believe that we share in common a care and a concern for soil. And even the largest scale cash croppers that are renting thousands of acres in our neighborhood, they care about their soil, and we can gather around that shared purpose and shared concern. We have gotten a little bit of funding through the Greenbelt Foundation, actually, who came to us because they saw what we were doing and said, we would like to give you a little bit. The bioregional work that the GTB and the 7 Generation Project has been doing has been such an inspiration and support. Right now, we do a lot, though, with just volunteer effort, a little bit of funding to get citizen scientists trained to go out into farm fields so that farmers can get access to the best cutting-edge soil sampling techniques to help them get some feedback on how their farming practices are affecting their soil that they care about. But we don't stop there, because in order for good ideas around regeneration and in order for the fire hose of money that sprays out right now from the federal government for regenerative farming techniques, we're happy about that, but the fire hose on capped soil or crusted over soil that isn't well aggregated blasts that soil, erodes the soil, and if the soil is not healthy and functioning and aggregated, that water, the money can't circulate and infiltrate and do its good work. So at our hyperlocal level, we're bringing farmers together of all types, and it is hard. We have to learn to listen. We have to hold our judgments. We have to hold our assumptions and our prejudices. It gets messy. And what we do, especially in the off season when people's fields are dormant, is sit down together and we look at some of our soil metrics. We talk about the challenges of weather. We talk about what we can learn about the cutting edge of soil biological regeneration. And together we build relationships of trust so that we can help each other to do more with the good ideas around regeneration and the money that's available. We want to get it circulating in our communities so that we can really make the most of what we're doing. And the soil is a teacher in all of this. And healthy functioning soil is not just propping up plants. It's circulating nutrients. It's holding water. It's cycling carbon. All these incredibly important things. And in our communities, if we can, like soil biology, aggregates the soil through its very glamorous snot, slimes, and glues that the microbes produce. If we in our communities, the human community, through the snot, slimes, and glues of conversation, of helping each other, of sharing implements, of sharing knowledge, of commiserating when times get rough, if we can aggregate our communities, and what we want to do in our community is tend the soil of community, then we can take all that is coming in the form of money and good ideas, and we can make the most of it. So that's the work that we're trying to steward. We have a circle of stewards that tend the soil of community, help to train citizen scientists, host farmer forums, and bring farmers together in each other's fields and in the off season. And we together hope we can regenerate a little piece of the bioregion and seed that change in other communities. And I will say that what I've experienced with the 7th-generation bioregion work, I don't know how far I'm in because my screen went dead. We are experiencing from the philosophy here something like what mycelium teaches us. If we recognize that most of what is needed for life to thrive is invisible underground. You think of these mycelial organisms underground. If they are thriving, nobody really knows until there's this little fruiting body that pops up. Sometimes it's magic. But that fruiting body does not show up where we plan for it to show up. We need to tend the underground conditions, and we need to pay attention, and wherever the fruiting bodies show up, we harvest, we encourage, we nurture, and we watch and we wait. And I love that this is an organization that tends for life to flourish, and I love that this idea of a fund is focused on that. So let's watch for those fruiting bodies and keep working to align with life.
I have the great fortune of still living on land that has been in our family since 1967. So I was 9 years old when we moved to this very degraded, hilly farm. It had a creek running through it. The creek became my playground. And I still live in that same property, and I'm still walking the same creek. And that is a real privilege. My mom and dad, so this small creek is called Cold Creek, and it's a subwatershed to the Humber River. And so I'm in the town of Caledon. And mom and dad, who grew up in Sudbury, had this great desire just to plant a lot of trees. And so we planted a whole lot of trees on this 100 acres. And they had 5 kids, and we were sent out to tamp down those trees, and most of the trees survived as a result of that. And I didn't realize at the time that we were, in fact, living on the south slopes of the Oak Ridges Moraine. And this little creek, in fact, is just a typical ecosystem that defines the Oak Ridges Moraine. And so I kind of cut my teeth on community mobilization and activism because in the late 1980s, 90s, the northern movement of people out of Toronto was kind of depopulating. Regional government, big sewer systems came along, and so people were moving out. And the local old boy farmer network in Caledon and every other municipality in the GTA decided to cash in. And so we had mayors' brothers who owned land on top of Mount Wolfe who suddenly are selling it for development. And so that was my call to action. Never had been into community activism, but that was a call. That land was that was my call to action. And so it was at the same time that I met David Crombie. and Susan Walmer. And the there was a bioregional movement that didn't go anywhere, as Joe was saying, or as Brian was saying. But there was a brand new language, like this land use planning, Oak Ridges Moraine, and it was the people that came across the moraine that created this thing called STORM, Save the Oak Ridges Moraine. And it was, we liked each other, we stuck together, we put in incredible time. And we were really instrumental in that push for the government to, in fact, enact legislation. And so that, and we're still fighting the fight now. We have a kind of a weird little anomaly of a government right now. But that's hard work, and it after a while it takes its toll. And so, Mom and Dad died in 99 and 2000, and we had this land, and we have another generation coming through, but this land is now the land and buildings are starting to, in fact, be a liability. The buildings are falling down. And so we were very fortunate to meet this fellow who brought forward this idea. We spent 2014 in designing a new vision, a way to overlay a productive, regenerative CSA onto our property. And it took some adjustment because this had been our land, where our family, where we walked. And so now we are 9 years into this, and 9 years into this, and we had started this project with the idea of these concentric circles. We called it the beacon of scalable hope. So there was the family farm, then the farm business, and then community. And we've done really well with the family. We've done really well with our farm, where we have not had the time or the whatever to kind of pull us out of the operations of day-to-day, farming and, oh my God, memberships and all of that stuff. And that's the value that the Legacy Project, the Greater Tkaronto Bioregional Movement, it's going to help us pull ourselves out, because we have phenomenal lessons that we have learned on how to take, working with the land trust, there's a lot of people there. There's a lot of farms that don't know what to do with their land. And rather than becoming liabilities and then selling for development, how do we convert those into growing food? And so this is something that we've wanted to do from the beginning. We have not been able to do so because I guess we're just waiting for the seed of the Legacy Project and the Bioregional Movement. So that is where very excited moving forward. And I know I'm 2 seconds. There's a lot of barriers. I'm a policy wonk. One of the big barriers is our policy framework. We were not there at the table when this Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan was developed. Our perspectives, so many different perspectives, but the small farm, so our policies actually are barriers to the kind of work that the Moraine Plan is designed and its objective is, which is to build stewardship. But the policies are stopping us. So that's my incredible interest, and I hope to have other policy wonks who want to join me on that.
My background is I'm a CPA, so it's finance and raising money. But my passion is being outside and protecting land, both including forests and farms. And so I worked in the stock market. I worked at American Express. I made people lots of money and thought, what the heck am I doing? So when I took time off for my kids and stayed at home for a few years, got back into nature and saving the moraine and advocating for it and going on marches and maybe tying ourselves to trees a little bit. It kind of sent me another way that is much more fulfilling. I still get to use my background in terms of speaking to people about money and funding, and I have no problems about that because I know how important it is to cover the costs of what we're doing, but also making sure that those funders get value for what they're doing, and it meets their needs as well as ours. So the Oak Ridges Moraine Land Trust protects 68 properties, about 5,000 acres. Some are farms, some are wetlands, some are Little Kettle Lakes, where our current office is a small property, 17 acres, but it's got a significant Little Kettle Lake on it, which is a key feature of the Oak Ridges Moraine, left over by the glaciers, a large hunk of ice, and it is just phenomenal to have that view out my window every day, and it reminds me of why we're doing what we're doing. We have a lot of funders that we deal with, landowners that are always looking at how can they better steward their lands, what can they do to make it better, how do they restore it. Our new projects, we've got 2 new projects where we've now started purchasing land, because we've now got funders that will help support the purchase of lands that have ecological significant values on them, and the restoration. So sadly, we are taking some farmlands out of farming, but we're restoring them for species at risk. One of our little star feature is a Kirtland warbler, a little bird that's disappearing and doesn't have enough habitat to nest in Ontario. So we have a team of experts from Fleming College and various universities helping us to restore those lands. We haven't seen them back yet, because apparently it takes 5 years for all of that growth to give them enough habitat to live in and nest. But we're very excited about it, and as are our funders. So a wide collaboration of organizations, a wide collaboration of funders. Our board is actively involved with that funding project and supporting what we do. We're a small but mighty land trust, and cover a lot of area across the Moraine and the Greenbelt, but we've got a lot of support from, like I said, a number of funders, including the federal government, the provincial government, and funders hopefully coming out of this project as well.
Conservation authorities have opportunities to cooperate on projects, but the GTB work is designed to bring them together in an ongoing and deeper way to be more strategic across the entire interconnected bioregion. John Stille is Senior Manager at Toronto Region Conservation Authority, TRCA. I think you'll be surprised to hear about how many projects of all sizes that they want to do that they can't do yet. Kate Hayes is Senior Manager, Ecosystem Restoration and Stewardship at Credit Valley Conservation. She's going to talk about the importance of connectivity across the bioregion and other aspects. Cory Harris is Watershed Services Coordinator at Ganaraska Region Conservation. He's going to share about GOAI to map the status of the bioregion and monitor efforts while helping municipalities meet their mandated reporting goals. So John, I'll hand it over to you, then Kate, and then Cory.
So I'm just going to really do a quick overview of restoration at TRCA, some of the restoration planning tools we use, and some example projects of projects we've worked on, but also unfunded portions of that work as well. And so this is our group, and we actually just took a picture this morning of the updated group for this year, but this was last year's. So it's a really dedicated group of folks. I'm Senior Manager of the Restoration Projects Group, but there's ecosystem management, forest management. We've got a nursery that grows trees and shrubs and herbaceous and all sorts of plants that support our projects. So all sorts of different avenues within restoration. These are all different groups implementing various portions, either individually on a project or collectively within a larger project. And I'll show some of those examples later. So this is our bit of our bragging slide. We did a 10-year summary of the work that we do, and you can see it ranges: wetland, stream, riparian, shoreline, forest and woodland, meadow restoration, just a whole plethora of work across our jurisdiction. Those those are all those black dots within TRCA's jurisdiction. So lots of work, lots of deliverables. I just wanted to draw your attention to some of the dots as clusters. So, as we've developed our strategic planning around restoration, we're focusing in on these priority areas where we can implement a collective effort of work that can have a measured benefit rather than sort of one-offs, that sort of follow the money and that kind of thing. We can sort of direct the money, really. So we start by finding the opportunities through desktop analysis. Conservation authorities are really blessed with a lot of data, and we can use that data to identify opportunities at the desktop level, but then field verify them on the ground. So all these dots are restoration opportunities. So they're wetland opportunities, they're riparian, forest, meadow, and really this is actually an outdated map. We got a lot more dots. So we're constantly identifying opportunities that we can and collect preliminary information that we can prioritize. But where do you start with all these dots? So we need regional planning tools. So we've developed what we call our integrated restoration prioritization tool. It uses existing environmental monitoring data, natural heritage modeling data to prioritize restoration areas using these sort of bite-sized catchments that are hydrologic and digital sort of elevation model created. We overlay that data to identify impairments. So impairments within that area, whether it's low cover, poor water quality, issues with streams, in-stream temperatures, and then also corridor connectedness, so areas that have a potential for corridor connectivity between different habitat patches, but that doesn't exist currently. So all of these things get overlaid and scored like as hits for impairments. And so the higher the impairment and the more that area could contribute to natural system if restored, that's the higher scoring in the IRP. We did it for the watersheds, which is the upper left, and we've been asked to do it and just completed it for the waterfront. So those dots on a map too are all watershed dots, but we've got those same opportunities all across our waterfront as well. So just a ridiculous amount of restoration potential identified, and this is not uncommon within all the CAs, and they have their own version of doing this. And this is a framework, so like the data can vary. We're creating bite-sized pieces to compare against each other, and that data can change based on what those objectives or priorities are. And there's a lot of utility. I won't read this, but it helps us guide restoration on our public lands. It helps with private land engagement and where we might put funding to private landowners and also like direct stewardship and community events. Helps with our regional objectives. Also, it informs our land acquisition plan program, which I'll talk about a little bit. And these new emerging climate change resiliencies and it's partnership building. These are all having a plan in place is critical for the partnership building. So I haven't showed this one in any of our things yet, but I do want to highlight this one because this was a recent land acquisition, and we talk about external partnerships, but there's a lot of internal partnerships that are involved in the successful implementation of projects in a lot of ways. And this was a piece of land that was acquired just connected to Albion Hills Conservation Authority that came about from our compensation program. So a developer has an unavoidable loss of land, and got funding to acquire the land. We use a variety of groups for restoration and ecology for monitoring. This is a conservation park. So it's a lot of collaboration internally that helps successful projects. These are some of the examples. We did a wetland project. We did a prescribed burn for meadow restoration to support species at risk. And we've also done extensive reforestation, and we're looking at tree tubes that help herbivory and competition for successful reforestation. We've done large-scale work for in-stream restoration projects. So this is natural channel design. So significant gains, reversing or fixing old infrastructure that gets the water off the land in neighborhoods as quickly as possible. It's all concrete lines, straightened, no habitat value, no real connectivity or natural heritage value here. And we've took out the concrete line channel and all the barriers associated with it and restored it to a natural floodplain, natural channel, associated wetlands in the floodplain, all that kind of thing. And there's a lot of community benefit. We've partnered with the city of Brampton on that one for their Eco Park program. So, and they bring the community for plantings and other interpretive events. The Meadowway, I encourage you guys to find the Meadowway. There's a website. It's a amazing land transformation project where we're converting hydro corridors into native meadows. So barren wastelands in terms of biodiversity are now being converted into what you see on the right through like basically agricultural practices in I'm gonna go back. Yeah. And so anyways, but I encourage you to look up this website. It's very good, and we're trying to grow that. There's a lot of interest, so we've got an unfunded priority in Etobicoke that's a similar project that we're working with Hydro One on as well. And so that was a real fast trip, wasn't it? And maybe too long, but really I just did highlight some of these takeaways that we have in terms of our restoration planning and implementation, and they very much center around partnerships, funding, and preparedness. So these plans that we have in place are critical for fostering these partnerships, securing funding, getting momentum, which is exactly what's happening here today. So really exciting. We're practitioners and implementers of everything that's sort of being discussed here. So it's just a great conversation. Well, I mean, we've got about 15 to 20,000 potential projects that need to be implemented. So, there's no shortage of work.
I'm just going to take it up to a different level. A lot of what you've heard from John is stuff that CBC, the sorts of projects that CBC also undertakes. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the cross-jurisdictional initiatives that CBC and other CAs are involved in. Stepping back a bit, most of you are maybe aware, but conservation authorities, there are about 36 in Ontario, and we're founded on a watershed basis. We focus on promoting integrated approaches to watershed management. I want to step back a little bit in time. The concept for CAs goes back to about 1941, and that was a gathering of some interested groups who wanted to really focus on arresting the existing depletion of natural resources to restore some measure of lost productivity by replacing the unplanned individualistic exploitation of the past 100 years. So I bolded the term individualistic because we've heard a lot today about partnerships and collaborations, and I think it's really key to just remember that this term of a lot of the impact coming at an individualistic, self-serving level, and that the solutions really need to be focused on collaborations. CBC is a science-based organization, and we're dedicated to essentially promoting and managing the restoration of the Credit River watershed. You've also heard today, obviously you can see in this area a lot of the urbanizing influences. The northern part of our watershed is more rural in nature, and then as we get further south, it's definitely urbanizing and into fully urban. Again, I won't talk about what CBC does individually, but I do want to talk a little bit about some of our initiatives too that are sort of cross-jurisdictional. These are just examples, but CBC participates. Most of you in this room are aware of the Global Biodiversity Framework that was signed in 2022 in December by 196 countries, including Canada. It sets out 4 goals and 23 targets. And Canada has a biodiversity strategy that sets out how each target will be achieved. And I'm going to focus on target 3, which is the so-called 30 by 30, so protecting 30% of Canada's land and waters by 2030. Under that target, there's a national steering committee, and that's made up of federal, provincial, territorial, and NGOs representatives, and they set up 3 working groups. One is Indigenous-led area-based conservation, the second is protected areas, and the third is one focused on quality. And as many of you in this room will appreciate, that's a huge topic. CBC does participate in this working group, and we're focusing on 4 main sub-working groups: ecosystem functions, ecosystem services, effective management and monitoring, and finally connectivity. And connectivity is the one I want to zero in on. This connectivity sub-working group identified 23 priorities for ecological corridors, so-called glowworms. You can't see them in this map, but so one of them crosses across our jurisdiction, and we've submitted a funding proposal to essentially engage landowners in restoration and conservation actions within that area and refine that corridor. The better part of our watershed is in private ownership, so a lot of our focus is on engaging with private landowners. We work with rural, farm, non-farm, corporate, and individual landowners. We're just awaiting a response on that one. Second one I just wanted to highlight, again, there are many other examples. These are just some of them. Environment Canada and Climate Change is in the process of updating their nutrient loadings of watersheds into Lake Ontario. The preliminary findings, and it's not really a big surprise, but credit is one of the larger contributors along with a few other watersheds. So CBC is looking at kind of a two-pronged approach. Our first is we have a hotspot identification tool, which is a model that sets out priority areas, contributing areas of sediment-bound nutrients. What you see here is some of our early work where we had to stop because we can't afford to expand it further, but we've got a funding proposal in now to expand it throughout our watershed. And then the next logical step after that will be, again, to engage with landowners living in those areas in red to undertake best management practices. And that's in both rural and urban areas, just to be clear, but it's focused on phosphorus. Phosphorus, as many of you will know, is a huge issue in Lake Ontario in particular in terms of nutrients and algae and all sorts of other things. So more to come on that one. Lessons learned. Wicked problem. So a wicked problem is a complex and multifaceted issue that's difficult to define, and it's even harder to solve. I'd argue that the issues affecting the Great Lakes can be classified as a wicked problem, and the solutions require collaborative, adaptive, and innovative approaches that engage multiple stakeholders and consider the system as a whole. So the GTB necessarily sets a framework for a whole system approach that facilitates innovation and collaboration. Some of our lessons learned as far as the importance of working at the bioregional scale, proven expertise. So I'll use CAs as an example because I'm obviously familiar with them. We bring over 7 years of experience in watershed-based management and leveraging extensive knowledge and best practices. Holistic management, we focus on interconnected ecosystems, addressing the challenges at the watershed or bioregional level for more effective conservation. Collaborative networks, strong partnerships with, in our case, municipalities and landowners that foster cooperative efforts and shared goals. And finally, resilience building. We've heard a lot of that this morning, but supporting adaptive management practices that strengthen ecosystems against key stressors and impacts. And if you went down the checklist in this area, we've got them all. And then as far as funding is concerned, just some food for thought, evidence-based decision-making. CAs really focus on using science to drive where and what sort of work we're doing, and that also fosters innovative solutions. The need for prioritized long-term investment in projects for ongoing sustainability. That's a big factor for most people in this room, I think. Flexibility in funding that's adaptable and allows for responsive action based on the actual needs rather than restrictive mandates. And that's a huge one that I think most of you will appreciate. And then capacity building, where funding supports increased capacity and allows for targeted conservation actions. So I just wanted to finish up by saying I am excited about how the GTB can transform our individual efforts into strong solutions for what I see as a wicked problem.
So I'm here today to talk about developing and classifying land cover data and the role that it can play in helping us tell the story. So If you're from Ontario, most of you know the conservation authorities are known for these following program areas. I won't go through them, but I just want to point out that all of these program areas in some form or other are supported by land cover data. The identification and classification of land cover data is core to both municipal and conservation authority purposes. Good land cover data is essential for important things like watershed monitoring, building models. I'm an engineer, so building models is something that our team does. So if you want to do a water balance or build a hydrologic model of your watershed to represent where's the water going, how is water balance being achieved, you need good land cover data to do that. It also plays an important role in effective watershed planning, integrated watershed management, natural asset inventories, estimating the value of ecological goods and services, and the list goes on. So each polygon shown in the image, once it's identified, it can have its own value, attribute data, or parameter for the various classifications that you would set. So whether it's carbon sequestration, impervious levels, natural assets, the possibilities are really endless. So just want to show you what land cover data can look like. This is ecological land cover or ecological land classification mapping that we have for part of our watershed. It's from 2010. The big green area at the top is part of the Ganaraska forest. It's an 11,000 acre forest in southern Ontario. And these lines are digitized by hand, and that takes a lot of time. And that leads me to the next slide of when you want to create land cover data, you're looking at an ortho image or an air photo, and you're clicking and dividing each land cover type into a polygon. That's expensive and time consuming, and it's a lot of work. And I was speaking with a colleague of mine, and he just finished doing that for his watershed. It's about, I guess, over 1,000 square kilometers, and it took him a year and about $100,000 in staff time. So that's a significant amount of effort to get this information into a format like that. So at the GRCA, we are developing the use of GeoAI, which is really the use of artificial intelligence and remote sensing to calibrate and automate the extraction of land cover data from air photos. It's challenging to get funding for systems work, and I think others have shared that today. It's not very sexy. Depending which way the wind blows. I think so. I think so, Joe. It is sexy, but people don't know it yet. So systems work, unfortunately, it will get funded sometimes. It depends what way the wind's blowing in Ottawa or at Queen's Park, and that's a very frustrating element of the work that we're doing in the world of conservation. So because of this approach that we're taking here in our watershed, it's very new. We've applied for funding several times but have been denied. I think the funders really aren't comfortable with it yet. And our journey in this has led us into discussions with other conservation authorities as well as Brian and the team at the Legacy Project. Those discussions have evolved into our team drafting a proposal to apply the use of GeoAI to produce land cover products across the GTB, the bioregion. So that would include all 13 conservation authorities and their member municipalities. So I know it's kind of audacious, but Kate said there's wicked problems out there, so you have to think big, I think, to tackle them. So what is GeoAI? It's really the recognition of features from an air photo and producing that data into a vector-based polygon layer. It's a very efficient way to do this. It's exponentially faster than clicking and digitizing air photos. And this technology really exists at the cross-section of geospatial data, data science, and artificial intelligence. And it's really made possible by the recent convergence of remote sensing technology, the increases in computational power, and emerging artificial intelligence programming. We're fortunate in Ontario that we have a consistent source data coverage of the bioregion. We have air photos dating back to 2002. And since 2008, those air photos have been refreshed every 5 years by the province. So kudos to the province for doing that. that's a huge bonus in doing this work. Additionally, we have high-quality LiDAR data with which we can build digital terrain models of the bioregion. And thirdly, we have a legacy, and conservation authorities have a wealth of legacy land cover data, including ELC data, which then can be used to train the software in identifying these various parcels. If you know what it is on the ground and you see it in an air photo, you can then calibrate your machine learning to identify that as that feature. So that's a huge bonus. So when you combine with GeoAI these three data sets, air photos, LiDAR terrain data, and land cover data, as input into machine learning and deep learning models, you can achieve some amazing things. So we've been testing this. This is an example of some work for one of our partners. The red polygons is the provincial data set, which is much more coarse. And the image on the right, the purple is treed swamp area, and the yellow is open marsh. And you can see the difference in the resolution. You can see all the polygons that are identified in that right image. And so the surgical precision of the stuff on the right is significantly an improvement from what's on the left. And if, I guess we don't have time to really get into it, but they had wetlands over subdivisions. So our data is a little bit better. Just saying. Maybe. So, in our view, the development of land cover data is really foundational to telling the story, but to also to prioritize future regeneration work within the bioregion, and it's really a logical next step in identifying and prioritizing restoration work and other regenerative practices. At the completion of this work, the land cover data products would be released as open data to all CAs, all partners, all municipalities. So that's something I think that's really important to moving things forward. And purely observational by nature, people can interpret this data through any cultural lens or worldview perspective. So if there's things that need to be identified based on cultural values or other things, that can be incorporated into this process as well. And on a personal note, the notion of producing this bioregional strategy and just planning at this scale is really appealing to our team at the GRCA. We've been working towards restoration strategies for our own watershed, and I think John has the Cadillac of restoration databases and being able to prioritize that work. We're just in early days in our area. And because of that, we've had to turn down some funding. We had a request from the World Wildlife Fund to create some constructed wetlands, and we didn't want to take that money and just do it wherever. We want to be strategic of where this stuff goes on the ground so that we get the most benefit out of it. So we've had to turn down some funding applications and opportunities because this framework wasn't in place. And further, I've been in the field, even though I don't look like it, I've been in the field of conservation for 25 years. And I have to say, it's been a tough slog the last few years with the political climate that we're dealing with in Ontario, and I really have not felt so unvalued as I have today. That in the rest of my career. So it's very exhausting to feel that way, but it's very encouraging to come into a room of people that appreciate the work that the conservation authorities do, and want to work together and collaborate on restoration at a scale like this. It's extremely, extremely exciting.
These folks connect ecological and social regeneration in the GTB in different and profound ways. Janet McKay is founder of LEAF, which does backyard tree and shrub planting. But Janet knows the secret. It's not just about the tree. It's the education that comes with it. It's that personal relationship. As part of our Bioregional Learning Center, she's also working with students, and they'll be doing a big tree planting in October, end of October. Carly Sprague is the community coordinator for 7th Generation GTB for the Social Prescribing Initiative, because well-being has to be more than just about pills. It has to be about reconnecting with trees and other parts of nature as well as community. Mia Masterfini is one of our student eco leaders. She's now in grade 12, and with her is her grandfather, Ganaraska Sinha, if he's able to stay, because he has an appointment he's got to rush off to. He was the elder in residence for her school. Creating more intergenerational connections in schools builds community and is also a central part of the social prescribing. So Janet, you're up first, then Carly, then Mia.
So LEAF is a small nonprofit organization. We're very community-based. We started in Toronto. We've since expanded out from there. I'll talk about that a little bit more. Just starting out with what's the urban forest, we consider it all the trees and shrubs growing within an urban setting. So that's on any and all lands, both public and private. In most cities, usually the private lands are a greater percentage than the public lands. And so, as others have been talking about today, it's so important to find ways to engage lots of property owners that have no necessarily connection to one another. This is just a great diagram of all the benefits of trees, in particular in an urban setting. And I'm sure the audience today is very familiar with all of these. Basically, trees are... We just can't live without them in an urban setting, and they make such a difference to our physical, our mental, our spiritual health. And of course, healthy large trees are the ones that are giving us those benefits. So getting those to grow and keeping them alive in urban settings is the challenge. One great thing is that the benefits that are measurable are much more understood now. And so that has helped municipalities make the case for urban forest management plans and investments with their local councils. But we're not able to measure the vast majority of the benefits that we get from trees. That's something we can't measure, we can just feel. So the backyard program really looks at every backyard as one landscape within the bioregion. And in my talks with Brian over the last year and a half, it's been really helpful in terms of just framing our work and thinking about it on this bioregional scale. I mean, we started as a very, very local neighborhood project, literally looking around saying, like, what's the potential in this neighborhood that's not realized? What can I do as an individual to be part of the solution? And seeing backyards as an opportunity that we're not being tapped into, and that we're sort of waiting there as a potential, and taking one idea, which is to plant native species, and just kind of running with it. But what we've learned is that it is about dealing with people. It's 90% people, it's 10% trees. And one of the big things is just removing barriers. So barriers like lack of knowledge or time, physical ability, resources, complex stuff. But really building relationships and trust, which I think Joe mentioned earlier, that is actually the key, is being a trusted source of information and help. And that means delivering on what you on what you promise, and it means being there for folks when they need something, when they need your help, and providing really, really good quality service for folks, and making that personal connection, and that is everything. This is just a very quick, I'm not going to go through the details of the program, but very quickly, it's basically a cost share program where we're getting 5 to 8 foot high trees planted in backyards for folks. We're doing like a full service option, which is by far the most popular. We have a DIY option as well, which is less popular, but some folks select that. But it's basically about getting native trees and shrubs into yards in urban settings. And 1 or 2 trees and a few shrubs can make a massive difference within an urban yard. And then if we think about that collectively over the face of the landscape or the bioregion, what kind of difference can that make? It literally is one by one, going one by one and offering that support. So we started in Toronto, we expanded to York Region, excuse me, in 2008. And for the last 3.5 years, we've also been working in Durham Region. I would say that one of the challenges for us is being very head down. We are literally hands in the dirt planting trees. Do we have time? Do we have space to look up, network, understand who else is out there, make those connections? Brian has helped immensely with that over the last year and a half, I have to say, already, in connecting me with folks that end up being fruitful connections where we can actually do what we're doing in a better, more efficient way. What I'm super excited about is the opportunity to do more of that. I want to mention tree inequity as an issue that we are beginning to learn about and tackle. This is a big issue in cities. I won't go into it, but the benefits of urban trees are not enjoyed equally amongst urban residents. And so we have to find ways to tackle that. But one closing thought that I had in listening to everything today so far, Joe, the diagram you put up of the planetary systems and how, some of them, many of them are potentially on the verge of collapse. All of these things that are happening over time, small things to sort of aggressions against the planet and eventually can hit a tipping point. I'm seeing this GTP effort as potentially being connecting all of these positive actions that are happening and actually the strength of that in being able to hit a tipping point for regeneration and actually reverse the process. So I'm very excited about that.
I'm here to talk about the wellbeing path, which is one way that we hope to foster social regeneration and reconnect with our life place. The map on the right is down the street from where I grew up in Aurora. I played soccer at Shepherd's Bush. I walked on each of those highlighted paths. I've ridden my bike down every street. As I reflect now, at that time, I'm not sure I ever truly saw the land that clearly supported my life and well-being. So I think that I need to go back to those trails and thank them. I'm also a nurse. I've worked in areas from oncology to family practice to the ER. I've seen lots of physical and emotional suffering and lots of people dealing with grief and uncertainty. No matter how amazing modern Western medicine is, and it is, I've seen amazing things it can do, and I've met some truly extremely empathetic and exceptional care providers. However, there is no pill to cure living in uncertainty. So, as the Toronto Foundation knows more than anyone, based on their recent Torontonian Vital Signs report, we're burnt out, worried, unsure, and lonely. Although there are some more vulnerable groups, such as older adults and caregivers, none of us are immune to loneliness, which we're defining as Dr. Faye Bound-Alberti does. To be lonely is to cease to exist in a meaningful way with others. So we are also ashamed that we feel so lonely because there must be something wrong with us. However, what if our bodies are reacting to what we've set up as our defaults? What if our bodies are warning us? We're reacting to the wrong story, so maybe we need to change it. Knowing that mental, physical, social, spiritual, and environmental health are completely intertwined, on the well-being path, we want to build on the previous approaches to address our feelings of loneliness and anxiety in a holistic way. And that sets off our first step of changing our story. So traditional Western medicine asks, what's the matter with you? Social prescribing then started asking people, what matters to you? Which was one of our jumping off points as we started to design the well-being path, in conjunction with other techniques such as guided reflection, mindfulness, and therapeutic horticulture. So in the well-being path, we're hoping to take it to an even deeper level, inviting people to really consider what matters. What makes my life and myself meaningful? And what will I leave behind for others? As I mentioned earlier, there's no pill to cure uncertainty or loneliness. And what we hope the well-being path will really invite people to think is, why would we want that? Can we reframe the worry and fear into curiosity, empathy, and wonder? And can we do this together? So many things in the society that I came from is about personal responsibility. But what about reciprocity and collective responsibility? I think the one thing that makes me feel the most powerless is when I'm acting alone and I feel like I can't do anything. But when I'm part of a team, one that truly commits to me and I commit to it, if we don't win together, no one wins. I think there are lots of opportunities for this way of thinking in our world. Things we can do that are fun, practical, meaningful, cost-effective, and increase our connections with each other and the earth. We're just stuck at the moment. So let's try to get unstuck in a meaningful way together. As you can see in this model, the First Nations perspective on health and wellness from the First Nations Health Authority, all the interactions and complexities that are intertwined with a human being. Using the metaphor of weaving, you can't remove one piece of this picture without the rest of it eventually unraveling. So I'll leave you with the picture of our Don Valley in Toronto, a true example of a landscape that can be regenerated by people who live there with collective advocacy and cooperation. On the wellbeing path, we are inviting people to physically reconnect with their life place, be curious and in awe of what is here now and what nature might need to thrive. Have a safe space to rediscover meaning, what matters, regrouping on the most basic need for survival of life as we know it on Earth, a functioning planet. And in order to get there, we need to feel like we belong in our life place, in our communities, on our planet, and to something greater than ourselves.
Unfortunately, my grandfather, he was with me here, but he had to leave. He had a doctor's appointment, but I will say his part as my elder in residence. This past spring, we worked together with 7 Generation GTB and Markville Secondary's Eco Club to create our legacy project, the first ever GTB Bioregional Eco Market. Ever since I was old enough to read the news, I knew that there was something wrong with the way we treated our planet. In the past several years, record-breaking environmental events inundated the paper, proving exactly that. We were in the middle of a climate crisis. We are in the middle of a climate crisis. I, like many people my age, began to feel helpless. We had our whole future in front of us, but now it was one that we couldn't be sure of. But humans can think in ways that animals cannot, and I realized that we can figure out how to fix this. We can become stewards of our planet, and we can regenerate our home, just as Indigenous people had done for thousands of years. But how? I've been asking this same question. How can I meet the challenge to secure our future? But in asking, I have found a wealth of people with answers. I have also found a wealth of people who have taken on this same challenge, like my fellow Markville Eco Club members, 7 Generation GTB, and all of our families, from grandparents to siblings. We came together to create this market. Experts gave their time and advice to help us formulate what we would tell people. Brian, Susan, and the Legacy Project guided us through the process, coordinating vendors, educators, and the venue. Over 30 student volunteers tirelessly worked to make sure that the market could be as vibrant as it had to be, or as it should be. But the real highlight of the day were the storytellers. We had 20 inspirational speakers. As attendees filled out their market passports, they began with 6 educational booths run by students teaching about the Greater Tkaronto Bioregion, growing your own food, and introducing sustainability into your day-to-day life. Visitors were able to interact personally with each booth as they were given seedlings and taught how to sustainably grow them, talked with Leaf, experienced nature through art, or made cards for their own moms and Mother's Earth, as we had it on Mother's Day weekend. They learned from regenerative farms like Heartwood and Mount Wolfe, whose farming practices are in balance with the Earth's natural processes. They also met incredible artisans who create stunning art using materials from our bioregion, including a carver who created very delicate carvings using an axe. Visitors were able to participate in a regenerative economy by purchasing items from vendors whose products were locally sourced. Best of all, though, they heard stories from people who were living in their place as stewards of the land. In the final countdown to the day of the market, I began losing sleep as I worried about the community turnout. But on the day of, people just kept streaming in through that door. We totaled at about 420 attendees. People were listening, but even better, people were sharing their own stories. It was so gratifying to connect with all of these people, diverse but united by the same passion for change. I think that at the end of the day, when my voice was gone, I realized that that was what was so beautiful about what we had created. I saw the sheer effort that so many people put into this idea that I had, effort that was put in because we all have the same goal. We are all facing the same challenge, but because of that, we had this incredible, incredible opportunity to work together and channeled this unmatched force that is a community. I'm going to be saying my grandfather's part now, so just pretend I'm him. My name is Ganaraska Sinha, and my role as the first ever GTB Bioregional Eco Market was that of the Elder in Residence for Mia. It gave me a wonderful opportunity to know about the Legacy Project, its associated people, Susan and Brian in particular. It was heartening to experience how an ambitious idea of the eco-leaders of Markville Secondary School was embraced, nourished, and brought to fruition by the Legacy Project. I was amazed to see the keen and genuine interest among these young students to understand the existential importance of our GTB. Their enthusiasm in protecting, preserving, and promoting our bioregion was extraordinary. I am over 83, and as I look back, in my teen years, it was all about cricket or beetles, and never heard of the perils of fossil fuels or climate change. However, in today's youth, like me, Mia, I see a clear understanding of their environment and a determination to save the planet. We, the elders, need to be with them and support them with lessons that we have learned from our indulgences. So that's our story, still evolving, of course, but a part of my story that I will never forget, one that me and my granddad were able to experience together and will forever be grateful for. I look forward, I have heard all your stories now, and they were amazing. So thank you so much. Thank you to Susan and Brian. That's my piece.
How do you fix a broken tree? The answer is that you don't. We started with, we're in a predicament. This isn't as simple as problem solution. We have to navigate a mess, a really complex challenge. There is a path we can follow. That's what we can do. And it starts at the bioregional scale. That is such a critical scale for us to live into, both for social regeneration, as the Toronto Foundation talked about, but also for ecological regeneration, as the conservation authorities have talked about. And we need to support those on the ground doing the work. Yeah, I mean, that's so simple that I even have to say it is incredible to me. We need to support the people on the ground, like the conservation authorities and like the generations coming together to change the story, like Mia and her grandfather. So this is about change the story, the big story, that overstory. We are growing that tree of life. That's a dream. That tree is a dream. And I need all of you to step up right now and help us live into that dream. We need to dream an audacious dream. How can we step up to build the relationships, to weave together the projects, to build the trust, and to create a bioregional funding ecosystem that is a model for the world? No one else is where we're at right now. No one else has these wonderful conservation authorities. We can do something that no one else is doing. So I call on people to dream bigger and create legacy. In 2005, I wrote a book called Dream, and I used the picture book format as a way to reach all ages. 15 top illustrators from around the world came together for the book. It became a bestseller. Dream culminates in the green pages, the color of go and the color of grow. And it ends by encouraging you to dream a dream, your very own dream. In schools, families, organizations around the world, thousands of people of all ages have created dream stars. And what can we dream up in the GTB to create a meaningful legacy? David Crombie actually helped us launch the Dream Book. And he shared 3 dreams for Toronto. This is from 2005. We're going to show you some video. And we've been asking children, adults, and older adults today in the GTB to share their dreams, to dream bigger and create legacy.
Big cities, like little kids, have dreams. And indeed, what motivates cities, what pushes them where they think they want to go, are the dreams. And I was asked if I would think of the dreams that I would want to have go in the dream chest for Toronto. The first dream about this city is about opportunity. The reason people came to Toronto from everywhere around the world, there is no place that has less representation of people around the world, more representation of people than we do in Toronto. Why do people come here? They come for opportunity. The second one is, I think, the second reason people come. They know the power and importance of place and community. And a third and final, I gather I get three dreams of the city is to continue to recognize the significance to us of our relationship with nature. Particularly for Canadians, they should understand it probably better than most people. And Bliss Carman and Archibald Laveran and Group of Seven, all of those people of that generation 100 years ago understood the power of the relationship between us and nature. Indeed, when that generation had to go to war in the First World War, they had to figure out how they were not, had to explain to people why they were not British and why they were not American. And they reached down for the one symbol they could get from the Group of Seven and all of those paintings, and they put up a maple leaf on the shoulder. And 50 years later, when it came time to create a Canadian flag, they chose a single maple leaf. If you go down to the United Nations in New York, and you look at all the flags of all the countries in the world, now about 180 whatever number, they all show either their history or their ideology, except ours. Ours is leaf, representing our relationship with nature. That's why the third dream is that we should never forget in this city the relationship we've had with our heritage of nature and how even more important it's going to be in the 21st century.
all have the same goal. We're all facing the same challenge, and we're all working together to do what we can in the face of it all. So it's been really, really incredible to see what people are willing to do. Scientist Carl Sagan said that our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. And he's absolutely right. Only we can save ourselves. So we need to come together and care for and regenerate our home, the GTB, and by extension, the entire planet.